is everybody?
Kevin?
They're waiting in close. That's
Kevin Lee needs a couple more minutes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, fine. All right. You'll text them the link, or you'll send Greg.
Emailing them now. And Bob too.
Yeah, Bob and Greg and Leah.
What was going on? I've been trying to get in since 5 minutes before.
Okay, Leah is here too. So now we're waiting for Bob.
Just sent it to him.
Okay. Okay, keep an eye out for Bob. He'll be in here in just a second. Might be Robert Griffin. Did you get him? Okay. Okay, here's Bob.
Okay, we have everybody?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to our board meeting for February, the first one in February. We will get right to it since we have a fairly full agenda for tonight. I want to open this session. There's not an official roll call listed on the agenda, but let me take roll call anyway. Trustee Griffin.
Present.
Trustee Zuniga.
Present.
Trustee Land.
On mute, Greg.
Here, sorry.
Trustee Dwyer.
Present.
And I'm here. So let me ask the superintendent if he could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Play ball.
Let me take you a few housekeeping things. We have our Spanish interpreter for the meeting this evening, Mr. Enrique Montaldo. For those who would like to attend the meeting in Spanish, that option is available to you. Enrique, would you please communicate that for us this evening? I see Enrique here.
I don't see him.
President Hanley, I don't see Enrique yet. Once we see him, we will bring him in. We don't see him waiting yet.
Okay, we'll bring him in as soon as he arrives. If you do wish to view closed captions of this meeting, please view the meeting on the SMUHSD board meeting YouTube channel. This link to the YouTube channel can be found on our website. You may view the captions in English as we live stream the meeting tonight, and you may view the captions in a variety of other languages if you choose to watch after the meeting has ended. Viewers can request additional accommodations by calling 650-558-2201. In closed session tonight, the board took no action that is reportable. So let me move on to public and governing board comments. This is a public meeting of the San Mateo Union High School District Board of Trustees. And if you wish to make a comment about an agenda item or during the public comment section at the beginning of the agenda, please use the raised hand feature on Zoom to be recognized when invited to do so by the board president to each item on which you wish to comment. And you'll be admitted to speak during the public comment period. The board president will call on you. Please note that comments are limited to 3 minutes. The board president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public comment depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. Let me see. Let's move to public comments on non-agenda items. I'm looking to see.
We don't have any at this point, Mr. Hanley.
Okay. Are there any board comments this evening? Mr. Land, I see your hand up.
Thank you. This is kind of on a personal note. I just want to say thank you to so many of the staff at San Mateo Union High School District, principals, teachers, district staff, our superintendent. Just wishing me condolences for Rose's, my wife's mother, passing away, and her funeral's tomorrow. So hopefully I can get through the meeting. I just want to say thank you. It really means a lot to me. And since I'm on saying some personal things, I just want to shout out to a couple people. One, the principals. I just feel like as a fellow principal, I just really admire all the work that you've done throughout this year. I think we are the most unsung heroes because of what goes on a regular basis. We just do what we do. And I know you've got like twice the size of the school that I have. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for the work that you do on a regular basis for our district. Thank you. Amy Johnstone, I know you're in the audience, and I'm going to just personally say thank you for all your emails. I know you send them to all of us, and sometimes I don't get to respond, but you have been such a support to our district as a parent supporter and PTO member, and just getting involved in so many things. And I just want to say thank you. So those are my statements for today.
Before we hear Mr. Hanley, I noticed that Mr. Montaldo is now here. So if we want to allow for the Spanish translation.
Mr. Montaldo, would you like to just announce that people can attend the meeting in Spanish?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Buenas noches, tenemos a nuestro intérprete de español para esta reunión de la noche. Para aquellos de ustedes que quieran asistir a la reunión en español, esta opción está disponible. Gracias.
Thank you. Ms. Zuniga, Trustee Zuniga, I see you have your hand up for a comment.
Yes, thank you. I first want to acknowledge that we are on Mateo Shaloni land. And I wanted to also recognize our school counselors, since this is National School Counseling Week. They do so much and they're so valuable all the time, but recently with this situation we're all in this world, it's been that much more necessary to guide our students to the right path, and just keep them focused and loved and supported. So thank you. And yes, also thank you to all the principals and just all the staff at Navy. I think everyone's been working, double time, and it's been really stressful. And us as a board, I know that we recognize that. We don't minimize that at all. And to our students too for hanging in there. I also wanted to just talk about, or I just wanted to mention that there are a few different events happening for the students. The first one is the San Mateo County Commission on Disabilities is having their Transition to Independence Fair Career Pathways event on Monday, February 28th from 6 to 7:30 on Zoom. Also, the ACLU North Peninsula chapter is having their annual event called Students, Schools, and Policing, Redefining Youth Safety. It's March 30th at 7 p.m. And then there's another one. Oh no, I think I'm off camera mostly because my internet is really bad. So I apologize if I'm choppy. Can you all let me know if you can't hear me? Okay. And then there's also a vigil to honor Chinedu Okobi on Sunday, February 13th from 1 to 2 in San Bruno, for those of you that are interested in joining that vigil. So I think, happy Lunar New Year to everyone that celebrates, and also just celebrating Black History Month this month, just, being really intentional in what we're learning, what we're teaching our students, what we're teaching our families. It's really important for all of us to be unified and learning about each other. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Do you have any further board comments this evening?
Ms. Leastwire has your hand up.
Leastwire.
We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Oh, okay. That's hard for a lawyer. Anyway, I want to echo what Greg said earlier about recognizing the principals and add to that the assistant principals, the teachers. It seems like there have been more challenge. The challenges aren't decreasing. They've been kind of increasing as things become more open and everyone gets excited about how we're going to maybe have less masks and how things are moving forward, just in the communities and in the country and in the state, of course. But it presents so many challenges that didn't exist prior to Zoom, and then Zoom, and now here we are again. But I think I ran into the athletic director at Burlingame today. I was crossing the campus, and I was just so excited to see so many students out. There were so many teams, lacrosse teams, soccer teams, swimmers. The gyms were filled. The athletic training room was filled. I cut through the gym. There were kids doing track. There were so many students out there taking advantage of this glorious day and participating in their sports that I was just happy. And I ran into the athletic director, and he looked exhausted. And I said, "How are things going?" And he kind of echoed what everyone's kind of been thinking and kind of feeling, I believe, that it's really difficult. He's working super hard, trying to keep everything moving and deal with everything as it comes. 500 people could now attend, managing that to a basketball game, all the different things that have to be managed and done. So I commended him for his work and told him that I support the work, and I'm so happy that he's doing it, but recognizing that it's very challenging for all of them. And I think we're going to see more challenges as things continue to open in the communities and students are out and about more, and then as schools become more open. One last comment, Black History Month. I tend to choose a subject and then read it. So I've done Spanish history, Asian history, and I started in January reading Black history, and I've read Black history before, but it always amazes me what I don't know, and how much you can learn just from picking up books and reading about the lives of others, what people have gone through, what the world was like. And even in times when, I was a kid, not realizing what was going on in other places in the country, because I was on a farm, really isolated. So there's so much to learn, and I am excited to venture into my Black history studies for the next few months. And then I'm sure I will move on, but it's amazing what you can learn. And I encourage everyone to read and learn more about Black history and the history of so many other people as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I would just briefly support the comments that have already been made. I think, this has been such a difficult 2 years. I think we're all really stressed out in many ways, and often exhausted by just the effort it takes to show up at times. But I think there's a lot to the saying that showing up is about 90% of life, and And so I really admire the people that continue to show up and make the effort to get us through this in a successful way. And it's been an ordeal, and it continues to be difficult many times. So I recognize that that we're not through this, and hopefully we're on the downside of the pandemic, but I'm not positive we are, but I hope that we are, and I do admire the people that have been so instrumental in getting us through this. So moving on, we have no communications to the Board of Trustees tonight. Moving to recognitions, recognition of students who have met the California State and District student standards for reclassification as fluent English proficient, helping make them multilingual scholars.
So maybe I'll start here. Do we want to do consent first? Oh no, I'm sorry.
Consent's coming up next.
Yes, thank you. So I was thinking about this item, and I was thinking if I was a person who brought my children to this country, one of the most pressing things I would want is for my children to be able to speak English. And that's one of the most important things we teach students of whether they're native speakers or not. And the folks that, the kids that we're going to recognize here and the staff that we're going to recognize have been working tirelessly, completely dedicated, utterly dedicated to our students and seeing them learn English. And there's what a gift that we give our students when we join them in becoming multilingual scholars. We're always, I don't know how many students are listening and staff who are here tonight. We want your kids to come back and work for the district so that you can share your multilingual ability with the next generation of students who come to this country or that come to our schools only speaking one language. One of the people who has been so instrumental in leading our English language learner program is Samia Showman. You're going to hear from her next. And we really appreciate her and all the staff members who are mentioned here on this agenda item tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn the item over to you, Samia, and you can make a few comments.
Thank you. Good evening, President Hanley, members of the board, cabinet, our administrators, staff, and families who are joining us this evening. I am so happy to see these amazing multilingual scholars being honored tonight. You know, when students are reclassified as fluent English proficient, it signifies that they've become like certified fluent multilingual scholars. Because in order to be eligible to reclassify, students have to earn a 4 on the LPAC, the English Language Proficiency Assessments of California, which we are deep in the middle of it, giving those assessments now in our district. That means over 1,000 students. It is scored on a 1 to 4 scale, so you do have to earn the highest scale, the highest score to reclassify, in addition to meeting additional academic requirements. Our EL specialists, present and previous, we've had some transition to different roles and some come in, work really tirelessly to support our English learners so they thrive, right? In addition to our teaching staff and our administrators, that's just one piece of the work they do. And one way that English learners celebrate their success is by getting reclassified. I'm extremely fortunate to work with an incredible team of EL specialists. A lot of them couldn't make it this evening, but I know that Sandra Glushkinkoff and Lillian Garcia are here. Sandra is new to this team, but not new to our district. She transitioned over from being our family engagement coordinator to our EL specialist, so we're super excited about that. And we also have one of our multilingual scholars from San Mateo who reclassified this year. And so I want to introduce and invite Sandra to say a few words, and then she can introduce Jefferson from San Mateo, who can share what being reclassified means to him. And I just want to highlight how special the student is. Most of our kids who meet reclassification are long-term English learners. Many of our long-term English learners are actually born here, but have grown up learning a second language at home and then acquiring English as a second or sometimes third language. Jefferson is one of our few English learners who actually started in our ELD program and reclassified very quickly. And you rarely see a student starting an ELD and reclassifying as quickly as he did. So Sandra, if you want to say a few words, and then Jefferson can tell us about his experience.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sandra Glushenkov, and I scribbled a few words. I'm only 8 days on the job, and I have already sat across more than 30 of our ELD1 students in this past 8 days. We're, like Samia said, we're in the midst of our LPAC. It's the state-mandated testing for our EL students. And one of the most challenging portions of this test is it's the speaking test, because it has to be done one-on-one. But it's a fantastic opportunity and a privilege to get to know our students. So our students are beyond a number, a graph, a percentage. Our students are the protagonists of their own story. Our students work incredibly hard, and they have these dreams, and their dream is to succeed. It is humbling to sit across from them, and after administering the test, it's like, Miss, how did I do? How long do you think it'll take for me to be promoted to the next level? How long before I can be fluent? Succeeding, learning the language, being part of our mainstream student population, it is a target, it is a goal, and it's one of the many hurdles, or I can't think of the word right now, that they have to achieve. I'm not gonna read everything that I've read. This is kind of like that I wrote. It's kind of like a book. But a few weeks ago, I came across a meme on social media that said, that read, "What is your superpower?" And our students, they are fully aware that to be reclassified and to become part of our mainstream student population earns them that special superpower, their special badge that only multilingual people have. So that is, in my eyes, what means to be reclassified for our students. Thank you, and thanks everybody from Samia to everybody that's involved in making our ELD program a success, and our families, our instructional assistants, everybody that's part of it. Thank you very much. And I think Jefferson is here.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, Jefferson.
Well, first of all, hello, my name is Jefferson Gonzalez. I will say a little bit of story about myself. I came to this country like 3 years ago. It was a big change of my life. In fact, one of the events that changed my whole life as a whole. Some weeks after I came to the United States, I have to take my test to see what is my English level. I'm be able to study in the San Mateo High School. After I took the test, I was assigned to take ELD2. ELD2 classes. When I knew that I had been assigned to ELD2, I was nervous for myself. I knew next to nothing about, well, English. Literally, in my home country, I almost did not pay attention to my English classes, but here I don't know, but managed to speak it well. My mother used to say, well, my family used to say that in times of a lot of need or worry, we gain something, like you get a mentality of, I have to do this and I have to work. And my ELD, and when I was in ELD too, it was kind of difficult. I felt it was not my level, and I met one of my a teacher that helped me a lot in my time during ELD too, Mr. Peñalosa. He's a teacher from Chile, and he also speaks Spanish, and he was one of the only teachers I knew speak Spanish, so I frequently visit his his classroom to speak some, and he helped me a lot in my tests in general. I kind of also helped me with my nervousness in this country. Like, this is new, uh, and I feel that what I did is just to make my mother proud. Like, I want to make my mother proud of me for everything she has done. For everything she has done to just raise me, to raise me herself, to take me to the United States just to save my life. Like, the only thing I can do to her is just learn English and make her proud. And that's a little bit of it. I'm not really good in speech, and I'm really nervous right now. So that's it.
Jefferson, you did an amazing job. We not only have you made your mother proud, you've made all of us proud. And we appreciate you spending some time coming on to share your story, and know that you're going to continue to be successful as you continue to build your life in this country. Thank you all.
Thank you. I'm impressed as someone who's tried to learn a second language myself. I know how difficult it is to try to make a 5 or 10 minute speech in a second language. So that was very well done. Thank you. Let's move on to the proclamation of Black History Month.
As has been mentioned by several of our board members, this is Black History Month. This proclamation is here for your approval. We've been working, Ms. Chalkley and I, to share some of the work that staff has done with the larger community. And like Ms. Lees-Dwyer, many of us have used this opportunity to learn more about the contributions of our African-American community. It was pointed out that somehow we, in our original proclamation, we somehow omitted recognizing the fact that we have our first African-American, Asian-American, and woman vice president as part of our proclamation. That's been added. Thank you, Mr. Hanley, for catching that. And so we bring this here for your approval. I see Mr. Griffin has his hand up.
Yes, Mr. Griffin, please.
Yeah, I have a quick comment. And as everyone knows, February is Black History Month. We have this proclamation. The theme this year, and I really was not aware that there were themes per se, so is Black Health and Wellness. While this is a time to look back, this is also a time to look forward. I want to recognize the many African-American men and women, such as Dr. Charles Drew, who is the father of blood banking, for their accomplishments. It's no secret that African Americans and other people of color suffered the burden of healthcare, the burden of healthcare disparities. This is evidenced by the COVID-19 pandemic's impacts. It's also evidenced by the disparities in life expectancy between African Americans and other people of color and white people. And it also shows that younger African Americans actually suffer from the same diseases as older white people do. So we see there's some serious disparities here. Health and wellness is vitally important to all of us. lack of good health care negatively impacts African Americans' general well-being, their ability to get an education, and to make a living. Not only is our physical health important, African Americans, like everyone else, need more resources to provide mental and emotional support. As we celebrate the accomplishments of African Americans in medicine, we should consider what we can do to address the inequities in our healthcare system that disproportionately impact African Americans and people of color. And I have one thing to say, and I love my board dearly. I love the superintendent dearly. We play well together. And, and this is just a respectful comment. The day that we don't have to say we studied Black history and we can say we studied history, a particular aspect of history, is when we no longer have the color disparities here. And I'm saying that, and I understand what was mentioned, and I think it was not hurtful, harmful, or anything. But, when we can say, well, I studied some history today. It was about the story of 1619. Or I studied history and it happened to be about the inner passage, or the middle passage or something. Then we start taking getting a little more or a little less, we're generally accepted, and it doesn't become like a lightning rod, because it's not Black history, it's history. It's a history of African Americans that happen to be Americans doing what everybody else does. Anyway, that's my comment. Sorry to take all that time.
Thank you. Trustee Dwyer.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm actually, okay, I understand. I mean, I do understand, but I've also studied Italian history because those are the people that my family immigrated from Italy. I've studied a lot of different history. So what my goal is to appreciate what everyone brings and to appreciate what people have been through. And that is my goal. And every country has had horrible things have happened to so many people. I've read Jewish history. And I think if we can appreciate what people have been through and what they've come through, it won't repeat. It can be eliminated. It cannot repeat. And I think that when I look at the Holocaust, I've studied that. I've studied a lot of things, and it's not, I'm sorry if I offended you, because I'm not trying to be racial in any way. I think we need to appreciate what so many different people have come through so that we can all move forward. And I like history. So, and that's all I can really say.
Trustee Land.
I just want to honor what Bob had to say. I think in the world, it should be about all history. And the thing that I'm noticing about these like Latinx history, Heritage Month, I've done this at schools and appreciated these much. To me, I think they're celebrations of things that need to happen over time, because we need to do exactly what Bob is talking about, where it isn't, it's just part of the integrated fabric of our history. And that's the way it should be. And then these months, to me, are celebrations of we're not there yet. And that's why we need to honor this. So I see both sides of that. And I just want to say, I would like to recommend to pass this the resolution in favor of Black History Month.
I'll second it, and I'll just say one quick thing. Linda, Trustee Lees Dwyer, I was not offended. I mean, and I try to say that in the context. It's not about you. It's not about this handful of people on the screen. It's about our society. And having to have 1 month, is kind of like, your children, all your children should be all your favorites all the time. And, and that's kind of, Greg articulated it far better. So I'm not upset. I'm not offended, believe me. But anyway, you got your motion in your second, Peter.
Okay, we have a motion from Trustee Land, a second from Trustee Griffin. How do you vote, Trustee Griffin?
Aye.
Trustee Zuniga.
Yes.
Trustee Land.
Aye.
Trustee Dwyer.
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the motion and the proclamation passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Let's move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull any item from the consent agenda this evening?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Trustee Land, and I didn't get, was it Trustee Griffin that second?
Yes, yeah.
And the second from Trustee Griffin. How do you vote, Trustee Griffin?
Aye.
Trustee Zuniga?
Yes.
Trustee Land?
Yes.
Trustee Dwyer?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So consent agenda is approved 5-0. And regular reports. K1, report of the superintendent.
Thank you very much. It's been a great week. I've gotten to visit all the campuses this week, talk to principals, talk to staff, talk to interim assistant principals. It's really been enjoyable to go out and see what's going on. I do think that some of the optimism and about opening up is exciting to see. This week, we've had conversations with assistant principals and principals about activities. Trustee Lees Dwyer mentioned the buzz on the campus, the energy. It's just really, really nice to see lately. We're talking about senior proms and activities in San Francisco for our students. I know that schools are really dedicated to making sure that event that so many students enjoy is a special one for this year. That this is a graduating class that has had a lot of things taken away from them. And this is an opportunity for them to have some fun. We're also into the play season. There's a play at San Mateo High School this weekend. Looking forward to going that. And then every one of our schools will have a play or two in March, April, or February. So that's exciting to go to. We had a Golden Apple event this past month, and we recognized Enrique Montaldo, our translator and EL teacher extraordinaire. Now he has to talk about himself in Spanish. That's probably pretty good. Anyway, he was the winner of the Golden Apple. I was awarded at the San Mateo High School staff meeting, and he's just a wonderful person. And I'm going to go back and look at the tape and see how he describes this to the Spanish-speaking parents there. We did have a moment at Cappuccino this week on Tuesday. Principal Jesse Boyce, after 4 years of being the principal at Cappuccino and leading that school so ably, announced that he's going to go back in the classroom next year. That was a shocker to folks, but when he explained his, reasoning to, to have a chance to spend more time with his children, they were very supportive of him. In that, although there were a bunch of cheers of 4 more years, like you might see at a presidential rally, but it was a really nice moment. And he's not putting down his pack, but he's going to keep working to lead that school. And we're lucky to have him there. I do want to mention that we're taking signups for middle college. That program is one of the crown jewels of the district and a reflection of the district's commitment to choice as well as equity, giving students opportunities, depending on who they are, making something personalized for them. And that program will probably end up with a waiting list for it, and we may have to have a lottery to select students for it. So that's a sign that the interests of high school students are changing some, and we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. In terms of a superintendent's report, wouldn't be complete without some talk of COVID. Cases are down. We're down from 500 to 350. Every day I follow the tracker, it's headed down more. Just this week, we tested 2,004 students and staff members. We had 20 positive cases. So that's a positivity rate of about 1%. In the county, they're running about 10% right now. The governor has relaxed some of the mask requirements outside of schools. We're not changing what we're doing. There's a full expectation that students wear masks indoors and that we eat outside. We're not going to change that at this point, but it is there are conversations going on here. The COVID sick leave bill was signed by Governor Newsom earlier this week, and we'll support staff who've been affected by COVID, and we look forward to working with our unions about that topic. And we follow the county guidelines and expectations, and we'll continue to do so. That's the end.
Thank you. We have two student board members, Kristen Yu and Taylor Wong. Since we're into a new calendar year, why don't you start and just briefly introduce yourself and give your report.
Okay, I'll go since I don't believe Kristen is here, at least not yet. But anyways, hi guys, hey everyone. My name is Taylor. I'm a current senior at BHS. It's been really amazing just having the opportunity to represent not only like BHS, but also students on the board here. So thank you for our amazing opportunity. But I'll get into my report. So hello, Superintendent Skelly, President Griffin, and our lovely Board of Trustees. I was going to start off with a thing about National Black History Month, but we kind of already did that. Thank you. But yeah, as I said before, it's as I usually say, especially when I talk about Heritage Months, although we take specifically February to recognize Black history, we should really take every day of every month to recognize the history of our nation and everything that has been contributed by just Americans, regardless of race. So the major thing I have to report is that recently, especially on Burlingame High, we had a town hall campus, and some students did voice their opinions on concerns about some issues that they perceived. One of them was that regarding the school shoe Chromebooks, that a lot of people found that there was some difficulty in usage, and I'm not necessarily sure myself. I have not experienced this, but from what I've heard, that is like slow computing speeds, as well as like the constant need to sign in and out of your account to use a computer is a possible issue. And I'm looking, and students such as myself and others in student council are looking into this to see what we could do, but I just wanted to bring that up. And secondly, let's see, so students have also noticed some instances of possible inequity and treatment among female and male athletes. I cannot speak for everyone in the district or all students in different district schools, but at least here at BHS, I can somewhat talk about this. Often I've heard reports that some people feel like the male sports teams are given priority or favor over the female teams. For example, the girls basketball team does not have cheerleaders present at their senior night, I believe, while the male boys basketball team does. Furthermore, I've heard that I was told that recently the girls basketball team senior night that I mentioned previously was moved from its original date to this upcoming Monday, the 14th, which is Valentine's Day. While the boys game was kept to original date, again, I'm not certain entirely of this whole situation. It may just be on particular campuses, such as Burlingame High, but whether this was intentional or not, it's really a show of like favoritism. It's not really fair and does not represent what we as a district represent or preach. So yes, as students, we ask that the district looks into these issues, and hopefully we can all find a solution that addresses the issue and benefits us all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your report. Report of the District Teachers Association, Mr. Childress.
Good evening, President Hanley and members of the board, district cabinet. First, I just want to recognize the young student who presented on behalf of his progress in the EL program. And I really feel the need to suggest that we need to do more for students who are arriving in our districts, who are experiencing trauma and experiencing difficulty as they show up in our districts and have a right to an education. I really enjoyed the idea that you know, they have some superpower when they are able to learn a second language. And I think that's something that we should idealize and that we should promote. But we should also support those ideas as well. I'd also like to recognize that, as many of you have said, that this is a trying time, and we should focus on the support that we've received and supported from our mental health professionals. It's an overwhelming time of trial at this point. And in conversations that I've had with not only folks on our own site, but on other sites, it's clearly evident that we are dealing with a situation where students are in a very serious situation for a variety of reasons. I think we need to really support anything we can to provide more mental health services for our students. Dr. Skelly mentioned the offset on, or the kickoff of National Counseling Week. I think we also need to think about reducing the class size or the staffing ratio for counselors in our district. The American Counseling Association recommends 250 to 1. We are currently at 450 to 1. I think we need to address closing that gap to a great degree, if not totally. In terms of Black History Month, I don't mean to say this in any kind of, aside, but, I was struck by many of the speakers tonight talking about, why they think it's important and what they think is important about Black History Month. And I think what is most important is that it should, I think what Taylor said, that it shouldn't be about just this month. It should be about all months. And what struck me most was that when I think about what I talk about in my classroom, I teach physics. I often talk about, influential scientists who are from, backgrounds other than what may be considered typical for scientists or Ivy League colleges. And I really try to champion those things. And I think we all do. But I really think it's really important that we consider the idea that this is not something that we should idealize just for 1 month and something that we should think about only for 1 month, and something that we should integrate for most of our instruction. Finally, as many of you have mentioned, the state has relaxed its masking requirements for public places. And while I know that it is not something that is applicable to public schools at this point, I implore you to consider the possibility that we may be in a situation that is not necessarily certain. While we may have reached the peak and we may have come down off of the Omicron surge, the distinct possibility exists that we may have to enact more stringent regimens. And my belief, and this is my personal belief, but I also believe it's important for our association, our students, our families, that we should stay the course and maintain the protocols that we have established at this time based on science, and not relax our standards before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. K4, report of the CSEA Chapter 519 representative.
Okay, good evening, everyone. President Hanley, Dr. Skelly, members of the board, and everyone here tonight. I'll keep this really brief. Thank you again to health aides, athletic trainers, attendance clerks, and those who are trained to assist with the COVID testing for all their hard work, dedication, and time. Thank you to the parents who have volunteered to come and assist where needed. We are grateful for your support. Classified and teachers go above and beyond what's outlined in their job description quite often, if not daily. And we have heard from some of our members that they have been expected to continue the reassigned work they did during the pandemic in addition to their normal duties. We hope that the district and administrators recognize the gaps in staff at sites and departments as necessary. Lastly, I have been officially appointed as president for our chapter, and our team has met with Dr. Skelly, Dr. Black, and Mr. Hawkins, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate with the district and supporting our members. Thank you for your time and have a good night.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
K5, report of the San Mateo Adult School Teachers Association representative. Sacrament.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Skelly, Dr. Black, and all of you, and Laura. I want to thank the board very well for the wonderful and surprising adult school teachers contract that you passed. It was amazing, and we are speechless, a rarity, but thank you just the same. We are also now looking for qualified teachers for various positions. Please see the adult school webpage. It's www.sanmataoadulted.org. This will give you the information you are looking regarding salaries. And thanks again, you thoughtful people. You've made us all speechless and thankful. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. Let's move to section L, special reports and appearances. L1, approval of expected enrollment and staffing enrollment for 2022 to 23 school year.
I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Scatena, who's going to walk us through this presentation materials.
Good evening, President Hanley, members of the board, and district cabinet. This evening, I'm presenting the enrollment recommendations for the 22-23 school year. Next slide. We use Decision Insight as our company that provides us with projections for our upcoming year and future years. Decision Insight gathers the data from our partner districts, our K-8 partner districts, and is able to do a reasonable job of projecting out for our work and and so here before you can see the projections for the upcoming year of our 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade classes. Last year at this time, these projections were changed quite a bit. I think last year we were looking at potentially a minus 1.8% decrease, and it's almost a full percentage higher our decrease in enrollment. We did know that we would have, that we did hit a peak around 2019 with our enrollment. and that we would see a gradual decrease over time. So you can see as a district what our decrease with about 6%, close to 6% over the course, a little over 6% over the course of the next 3 years. Next slide. In summary, we will see a decrease from the previous year, an estimation of about 261 students. Our recommendation is to decrease our staffing capacity by 205 students, and we'll show that on the next slide. What we've found is there's many unknowns due to COVID, a lot of relocations. Our K-8 districts are, for the most part, all much lower than in previous years and much lower than even projections that we were looking at pre-pandemic. So 2018-19, these numbers that we're looking at projecting now are much lower than we had projected even a few years ago. And then finally, as I said before, we did see pretty much our pinnacle or apex of enrollment a couple years ago in about 2019. And if you look at the projections over the course of the next 6 years, some schools will see gradual decreases, while others, I will say, was dramatic, with some schools seeing 10% or more decreases in many areas. Next slide. We use a conservative model. We have two options, a conservative model or a moderate model. We use the conservative model for our projections and our capacity and staffing. We have used that model for at least the last 5 years. In the first column, this is our current staffing capacities and enrollment capacities as we currently stand. In the second column, this is our current enrollment, so you can compare those numbers and see how we did. But that does include all of our programs within it. And so programs meaning middle college students are included in there. That's almost 200 students, 185 students to be exact. Independent study students would be also in there. That's about another 110 students who are being served in independent study and in e-college. And so those students are also reflected in those numbers if you look in column 2. In column 3, that is the number of, as of January 31st, number of students who are enrolled, so verified enrollments during our enrollment cycle. Tomorrow ends our enrollment cycle for priority enrollment, meaning that a family can have priority, meaning they're guaranteed their school of residence, and they also have the ability to put in for an intra-district transfer to the school of choice. In the fourth column, these are the projected enrollment for the 22-23 school year. Those numbers include our special day classes. And in the fifth column, these are projections, and we exclude the SDC classes. And then finally, as you can see, these are our recommendations for our board adopted capacities when looking at the projections from Decision Insight, historical data that we use in analysis, and looking at year over year graduates compared to incoming freshmen, but also taking into consideration the transfer requests. And in the bottom, comparing the board adopted capacity for 21-22 and looking at 22-23, you could see 205 student decrease is our recommendation for decreasing our staffing capacity. Next slide. Every year, we are proud. Every year in October, I do an annual presentation to the board. And when we talk about enrollment, we talk about how many students get the transfer or their school of choice through the transfer process. In most years, we are in the 90% of students getting their choice. We've always been between 90 and 93% of students getting their school of choice through the transfer process. We do anticipate, though, this coming year that it will be a bit more difficult as our capacities are decreasing, and we were going to not have a lot of wiggle room at all the different school sites. But on this slide, the incoming incoming ninth graders, and as of a few days ago, what our transfer numbers look like. The way to read this slide is on the far left column. Those are the residents where the students would have been residing. And on the top portion, those are the numbers, or bottom portion, those are the total numbers of requests into those schools. And if you match up the colors, you can see the difference with the closer those numbers, the color, for example, the closer the numbers are, the more likely we can do one-to-ones. Where there's a great difference is where it becomes far more difficult. For example, where you look at San Mateo High School requests into Aragon, it's 113, which is for several years now, as long as I've been doing this presentation and running the enrollment center, it has always been the most requests of any other requests from San Mateo to Aragon. And again, 113 this year. If you look up above along the Aragon line and compare it to San Mateo, there are only 7 requests from of students requesting from Aragon to San Mateo. So it's a difference of 106 students. And so it's going to be difficult to get one-to-ones. And for the 7 students, they'll be able to match up accordingly. So hopefully this makes sense, but it does take some time to look at this slide and take in the information. In the middle, we have Hillsdale, and we have always committed to making sure that we fill the 3 or in past years 4 houses there. Next slide. So we recommend using the conservative model for projections and allow us to check our enrollments and our verified enrollments throughout the spring and see if there's any school sites that need modifications because of verified enrollments coming in. We recommended to decrease overall staffing capacity by 205 students. You can see the decreased capacities at school sites. Burlingame High School decreased 25, Cappuccino 35, a decrease at Hillsdale of 55, Mills High School 55, and a decrease at San Mateo High School of 35 students. We would keep Aragon unchanged based on the numbers that we saw for projections and also the large number of students requesting in to Aragon. Additionally, next Thursday, we will have our lottery. And so the lottery gives a priority number to families so that they can get we have our 15 seats. That's board policy for students at 15 seats to be available at every school site. The first 15 students on the list will get their school of choice. And then with the capacity numbers, we would allow for transfers up to that capacity number. We also highly recommend approving a transfer of upperclassmen or 10th to 12th grade requests. We ask for that for a variety of reasons. Normally, students who experience a school campus and are making a request as a junior or senior for a transfer, there's usually a variety of reasons for that transfer. A lot of times it's that a family might have moved mid-year and wants to a different location and wants to stay in the school that they started in. So those requests are usually, we recommend that those be granted. Finally, permit one-to-one transfers up to, once we hit the capacity number. And I might have said this or not said this, that make sure we will first make sure that sibling transfers take place before the 15 lottery seats. So a student who has a sibling at a school and this family requested for transfer, they do not have to go through the lottery. They're automatically granted as long as the sibling is residing at that school requested. Next slide. The next slides show individual schools and what their projections using the conservative model and percentage would be. And looking at this, you can see the capacity that a school, for example, in Aragon's case, they can take up to 2,002 students. Now that is 2,002 students would mean every classroom being used 7 periods a day or 7 periods in a block day, 2-day period. And you can see the number of seats available. Next slide. Here you can see Burlingame with the Burlingame is a great example of, if you looked at these projections 2 years ago, they were not supposed to decrease whatsoever. So, you know, the pandemic has been pretty unpredictable. And this is showing that how unpredictable, because the numbers have shifted and almost even flipped in Burlingame, with decreases of almost over close to 9% over the next 3 years. Next slide. Cappuccino, we knew Cappuccino was going to experience a steady decrease in enrollment over the course of the next few years. I don't think the pandemic helped in that case, and it's exacerbated the enrollment decrease considerably. Next slide. Hillsdale High School is showing that we did expect a decrease over a few years, but it's for the most part leveling, going to plateau or level off, and looking like a pretty consistent number coming into Hillsdale. And I know the school has revised their house system to reflect this, and pays very close attention to these numbers so that their house system can respond accordingly. Next slide. Mills High School has also been somewhat predictable, but again, Millbrae is similar to San Bruno, but not as great as San Bruno, is looking at a decrease over the next few years, and then it looks like a plateau of those numbers. But again, numbers close to or just surpassing 1,000 students. Next slide. Peninsula High School, generally for a continuation high school, the numbers reflect sort of your junior and senior class increases and decreases, and that's what you see in the projections. But it's hard to predict, which students are going to need grade recovery, credit recovery, or need extra supports with the transfer to Peninsula. But this is sort of an estimation based on sort of the percentage of juniors and seniors at the comprehensive high school sites. Next slide. And then finally, San Mateo High School, some decreases, about 5 to 6% over the next 3 years, and then a leveling off. And these numbers are pretty consistent with what we were seeing, although I think prior to the pandemic, I think we're looking at San Mateo High School increasing over the next few years. And you could see that it's sort of a 1 to 1.5% decrease per year. And next slide. And I'm prepared to take any questions.
Greg, I think it was the first.
Yeah, thanks. Don, I really appreciate that. You always do a thorough job, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, I was noticing the one observation I was going to make was a few years ago, it was an increase in the South and a decrease in the North. Now it is a decrease across the board. It just depends on which school and what area. So thank you, first of all, for that. Some of my observations and questions have to do with increase in housing. I mean, one of the things that up and down the peninsula you're starting to see is an increase in housing markets. new housing developments. And I'm curious, and Dawn, you don't have to answer this. This is just kind of a general question out to the world. Really, we have all this building and this influx or the potential influx of families, and it's not coming to fruition based on this decision insight. And it's almost like I want to ask the company, or I want to ask what's happening and what the concern, why is this not happening? Or if we're not increasing over these next years up to 2027, is it because you still have, it might be new families or just couples who are not having families yet and then eventually we'll have an uptick again later on. Again, I think you brought up a really good point about the pandemic. I think there's been a definite shift in our area, especially on the peninsula, about people leaving, working from far away, retiring early. These are all factors we need to take into account. But is that a permanent problem or is that a temporary problem? So that's something that, I don't need an answer to, but I really, as a board member, I want to get out there and really have people think about, because it really has ramifications. So that brings me to my second point. And again, Dawn, this I don't think is for you, but it might be for Kevin or for Kirk. But with all this decrease, and you did mention like how many per school, like 25 here, 30 here, we're talking about a reduction in FTE. And I'm wondering when we're going to start talking about that for the upcoming year, when we start doing our budget planning and how we're going to shrink in a decent way. And Kevin, I know you mentioned about being creative about how we might do that and how we might be able to keep our employees, but working in different ways and in unique situations. So that is a question I really want to have explored, or at least discussed to some degree. My last point really is about just, even though with these decreases, I want us to maximize what we have going for us. And do we want to decrease class size or FTEs by class size? Do we want to consider that in the budget? Is that something we want to consider? So those are my questions and thoughts. Thanks. And Dawn, excellent job.
Let's see. I think Trustee Dwyer is the next one.
I'm not sure I was, but I'll just go because mine is rather quick. Yeah, the presentation was really good and very easy to understand. And I like your graph.
You put yourself on mute.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Do the borders come into play at all in San Mateo? Do we have people who live on the border of Aragon and San Mateo that have gone to school with kids in their junior high who now they would be separated and they would be going to San Mateo instead of Aragon? Do we see that? Or Hillsdale?
Yeah, that's a factor. I mean, our boundaries for middle schools do not follow the middle school. So there are kids that have to go to a different school than their classmates.
And I think that's a challenge, because when students come out of 8th grade, they've made friends and, they're more connected at that level, and then they're split up. And that might be something we should look at down the line. I'm not suggesting it for right now. And I agree with Greg. There's so much new housing coming into all over the district. I wonder if the numbers will hold in the long run, because there should be more students coming from the housing, and it could be we'll see that in the elementaries with young students coming up through the line. So it may take a number of years, but I think that once we're post-pandemic and people are coming back to public schools too, and maybe people return to California or move into the new housing, we may see these numbers change. It's hard to understand how we can be building so much housing and that we're not going to have more students out of it. So thank you very much.
Do you want to respond to any of that, Don?
He doesn't need to.
Yeah. So Decision Insight takes into account, so we do send them and they update the new housing comes online. If you remember when we did the boundaries out in Burlingame along the sort of hotel row down there, we did take into account all the new housing that was coming online. And so they do a pretty good job with being on the tip. Now, there's certain markers for that, so it should be folded into the numbers, but I think it does reflect that as quickly as these percentages went decreased, they can easily go up with an economic recovery, a return of workers to the peninsula and to San Francisco and to the area. And so I do think that if we're looking at long term, I think it's hard to use these numbers, to be brutally honest, to look 5, 6. I mean, honestly, to be brutally honest, we actually had 4 more years tacked on, and we didn't think it was viable to look at those numbers because the pandemic really changed the scope of the work. And so I think if we want to look, I think looking at the 2 to 3 year is maybe the max you could really look at what the impacts will be.
Trustee Griffin, you had a question.
Yeah, I just got and I don't know that I need an answer on this. Cappuccino, I think we need to re-examine that because, the size, because in the past we've talked about how can we increase attendance if there is a way, either through programs, and apparently now we can't really tell what's going on, maybe because of the pandemic, or that, we're not going to be able to have CAP have a full comprehensive high school experience. Because at some point when attendance drops, there's a budget shift or a budget dynamic, and all of a sudden things like the athletics and the music programs and everything, you can't support that. And I really don't want to see that happen at CAP. It's too good a school. And then the other thing, it seemed as though with Peninsula, the attendance there isn't so much, and it doesn't function like the other campuses, in that there's not the cohorts moving here, but it's also a function of restorative justice and our policies because we had a policy where we were really trying to do more on campus with guided studies and other things where people didn't necessarily end up at Peninsula. And so that attendance can change, because I know we're talking about certainly the capacity and the ability to serve that community. And it seems as though that's one of the big factors. And, it's hard to figure out where that's going to go from where we are now, but certainly that's something we ought to be aware of. And then, the last thing is sort of a esoteric comment about the pandemic's impact on our lives long term, because a lot of companies have given up a lot of office space. A lot of companies have relocated, and that was part of that was pandemic related. A lot of companies have relocated out of California because of the tax structure. And, where I've had clients that like Tesla, guys that work for Tesla, and they're relocating out of state. So I don't know that I don't know what the bounce back will look like. And certainly the affordable housing that I've been looking at with one of my daughters, it's not, I don't know what the definition of affordable housing is, but it's certainly not real affordable for many people. So anyway, those are comments. I don't need any responses.
I probably would just say one thing about Peninsula. You're right in regards to the enrollment and things to change. So for example, Assembly Bill 104, where students can apply to have their credits reduced. I mean, we probably I think I've shared it in a weekly with the board. I think we've probably close to 40 or 50 students who have reduced their credits because they struggled during distance learning. And to the California minimum standards. And so those students historically, if they had struggled in class, in-person learning, they likely would have been referred or opted to go to Peninsula for recovery. And so those students are still at the comprehensive high schools and waiting to graduate.
Can I respond to a little bit to some of the comments, if that's okay, Mr. Henley?
Yeah, could I just ask, I had a conversation with Dawn this afternoon about the difference between the seniors. Were you able to kind of figure out what that, we have an actual increase in seniors projected for next year, which is unusual, I think. We're usually struggling to keep the number of seniors up. Did you figure out why that was?
Yeah, I could give a more specific number, but year over year, what happens is the fifth year seniors, so students with IEPs who are fifth years, and students, ELD students who are approved for fifth years, which are many, that would be the increase of seniors. So you're taking sort of like, let's say 13th year and combine it with the seniors from the junior year prior. And so those numbers would be combined.
Okay. Go ahead, Kevin.
So I think Ms. Lees-Dwyer asked a question about, Mr. Land, about staffing and enrollment driven, and what this has. We have a large part of the formula that determines staffing is based on enrollment, but there's also other priorities that we have to do in terms of targeting resources for our unduplicated count, or our SDC students, or our English language learners. This year, the number of kids who came into our school district as English learners was much higher than we projected or we've seen in the past. And so it's our hope that we're going to use some of the savings, because you decline this much. This 205 students represents about 8 FTE that would be cut, but we're going to add resources to our English language learners, so that we can match when more students show up to our district. We're interested in that mental health issue that several people have mentioned. We know that we're not going to be able to bring down things evenly. We're not going to be able to, I would say CAPS enrollment, frankly, will fall more than 55 students, but it's really, really hard to take an enrollment on the way down and make those kinds of cuts to match that issue. So those are, so we have this opportunity, and then we also know we're in a competitive job market for hiring teachers, and we're going to use, we should use some of that resources to improve compensation and working conditions for our staff. If the board knows, I'm not a big fan of across the board class size reductions, but targeting our English learners, targeting some of the classes that involve our students that need extra services and provide there, that's a good place to put resources. We are in the throes of a conversation about the bell schedule. If you remember, the board approved the bell schedule that has all of our schools with 4 days of block and 1 day on Mondays for the same. This was a big move. Dr. Kemke led this effort, and there's been some questions about moving, should we relax that expectation? I would encourage the board not to change the bell schedules at the schools, because having a consistent bell schedule across our schools really makes it easy to retain staff and get and offer full-time positions for those folks that we have. So even if we're cutting at Cappuccino, there may be a part-time position at Mills that we could do, and then we can also continue to have those programs there. San Mateo High School has our biggest catchment. It has the most students who reside in that area, so that when there are more students who want to flow out of there, we're in a good position to maintain that staff. If we didn't have all those students who wanted to leave San Mateo High School, that school would be would be overflowing with students. So the boundaries issues is something to look at. You have done some work on that. If you remember, all that housing in Burlingame to the north of Burlingame, you changed the boundaries so those students go to Mills, which may have an impact that we just don't see yet as we go forward. Yes, there's housing being built. No, most of it's not family housing, but it's more couples and yuppies and folks like that. But we, as you know, we want to build family housing in the San Bruno Hills, and that would be our contribution toward supporting San Bruno. This is a complicated subject. We could talk about all night, but those are just some initial thoughts.
Mr. Griffin, you had your hand up. No. It's okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Let me check in. Is there any public comment on this before we take a vote?
No, President Hanley, there's none.
Okay. If there's no more discussion, is there a motion to approve this this plan?
So moved.
That was Mr. Land.
Yeah, that was Mr. Griffin. Then I'll second.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my computer's not exactly great on sound here. Okay, Mr. Griffin made the
aye. Yes.
Who made the second?
I did, Mr. Land.
Okay, Mr. Griffin votes yes. Trustee Zuniga?
Yes.
Trustee Land?
Yes.
Trustee Dwyer?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that is approved 5-0. So our next one, L2, is a supplement to the 21-22 LCAP annual update, basically an update on academic performance.
Thank you. I'm going to ask.
Was, postponed from last meeting.
Yeah, Ms. Kempke, I'm going to leave this one for you and Mr. Simmons to take from here. Dr. Kempke.
Sounds good. Good evening, Board of Trustees and all that are watching our meeting tonight. We're here tonight to share an update on LCAP goal number 3, which is regarding engaging in relevant learning. You can go to the next slide. So as you can see, we've updated on our goal around authentic relationships in the fall. There will be another piece of that coming in March. And safe connected communities, we heard about that in October. Tonight, we're going to focus in on inclusive relevant learning, and that's just focused on the academic data. There's quite a bit here that Mr. Simmons will be covering. The rest of this goal area will be covered in April when Dr. SMUHSD comes back and talks about our English learner progress. And then our last goal area is supporting and empowering staff, and that will be shared in March. Go to the next slide. So just an overview of the presentation. There's actually a few different things included here. We're going to look at the goals and metrics related to goal number 3, which includes panorama survey data, grades, students, 10th grade students on track, our APIB results, SAT results, which are required because they were done in lieu of the CASP, graduation data, and then as required, we are going to cover, Mr. Simmons is also going to go into the specialized resource expenditure update, which is basically our COVID money and how it's been spent. Go to the next slide. So these are the 3 goals. I just spoke to them. Next slide. Just so you see the goal language again, as you remember, we aligned our LCAP goals with our board goals. The inclusive relevant learning for every student is speaking to that our goal of providing students with academic, social, and emotional learning experiences that are relevant and inclusive, as well as a tiered support system so that their needs are met and that they're able to reach their potential and individual career and college goals. You can go to the next slide. Under this goal area, we have 3 strategies in which to meet this goal. They're aligning our learning to students' lived experiences, interests, and identities, continuing to build our multi-tiered system of support, and increasing students' access to coursework aligned to their interest in post-secondary career and academic goals. So the metrics associated with it are the ones that Mr. Simmons is going to cover tonight. You can go to the next slide. Just as a reminder, this goal area also is related to our equity work. You can see it. I covered this slide in December, just talking about the collective work we've done in service of equity. And this one specific is to how we're transforming our classrooms to ensure that we're meeting the needs of students and creating experiences for them that reflect their lived experiences and their identities. So I won't cover all the details here, but now Mr. Simmons is going to take over on the next slide and talk about the same work, but in service of our culturally responsive MTSS. Mr. Simmons, you can take it away.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Good evening, President Hanley, board members. Alongside our work to transform into an anti-racist organization, as Dr. Kempney just said, we've been building and refining our approaches to intervention as a district, right? The educational terminology we use is a multi-tiered system of support, or an MTSS. This system of support is meant to articulate a seamless, data-driven approach to supporting students. It starts with ensuring that all students have a strong first round of instruction on new ideas, skills, or concepts. It also entails ensuring lots of scaffolds and supports and for students, so that 70 to 80% of students would learn the new content after that first teaching in a perfect world. And then it also has part of this system is secondary and tertiary interventions that are longer in duration and intensity as students continue to struggle, if they continue to struggle. This might end with a student being referred for an individual education plan in special education, but the goal is that the increasingly intensive interventions are successful and there's no need for students to be referred for an IEP. We've been working for 5+ years on the development of a set of structures and practices that reflect a model MTSS system. This graphic sort of charts that evolution. While our work has slowed a bit with the pandemic, we continue to make progress on creating a guaranteed and viable set of interventions for all students, especially those who are struggling academically and are reflected in some of the data that we're going to share tonight. Next slide, please. I apologize. I have a coworker here who's making noise in the background. Sorry. Now, I'm going to really relatively quickly walk you through this data in this presentation, then open things up for board member comments or questions. We've broken the data review into sections based on the metrics on which we are reporting. The first section is related to the first area of this goal. Can you hold on just 1 second? Sorry. The first section is related to the first area of this goal and has to do with how students perceive we are doing it all at providing all of them a learning experiences that are aligned to their identities and lived experiences, using the Panorama survey to tell us that. This survey was administered in October of 2021 to all students. It should be noted that we will do a more in-depth review of the Panorama survey of all stakeholders later in March, but we thought it'd be helpful to pull out a few key questions relevant to this element of goal 3. And if you'd like, it should be further noted that the survey was completed by 83% of students in the district. So, and actually a pretty representative sample of all students in the district. Next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, students generally think that their teachers ask them to explain their thinking and not just produce answers to questions. Next slide. Similarly, in this slide, you can see that 86% of students responded that they are learning a lot almost every day in most of or all of their classes. Next slide, please. This third slide from the Panorama survey shows that we have work to do to ensure that students consistently are engaged in schoolwork that's relevant to their lives outside of school. Next slide, please. And the final slide in this set shows a similar idea that fewer than half of students see their schoolwork as relevant to their daily lives. We have work to do on this. Next slide, please. Now that we have spent a little time with how students perceive the learning and relevance of their schoolwork, we will now shift to some of the more traditional academic indicators in our district metrics. But I want to preface this by quickly sharing, as we continue to evolve in the pandemic, how student attendance was this fall. Next slide, please. This slide shows the breakdown of our key racial subgroups and the percentages that were consistently present during the fall semester, and the percentage of that group that was chronically absent. You can see that in the yellow part of the bar there. Chronic absenteeism is defined as students who missed 9 or more days or 54 plus periods of school this fall. It should be noted that given the pandemic, Understanding why students were chronically absent is complicated, since if you remember, if a student contracted the virus, they had to quarantine for at least 10 days. You will note here, however, that Pacific Islander and Latino students have the highest percentages of chronic absenteeism. Next slide. This slide shows the breakdown of our other key subgroups and the disproportionate rates of chronic absenteeism among our students with IEPs and 504s and our English learners. And we share this data because we do see a significant increase in chronic absenteeism, broadly speaking, and it's going to inform how we talk about grade data in the next few slides. Next slide, please. I'll now move into reviewing at a high level semester grade attainment among all students this last semester. Next slide, please. As you can see in this slide, which is a summary of the students who consistently attended in the fall, a very high success rate among the 8,000 students who were consistently in attendance. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, you can see in contrast on this chart, among the nearly 700 students who were chronically absent, not surprisingly, a much lower success rate this fall across all subject areas. Although I will say that it is a testament to the flexibility of our teachers and the stick-to-itiveness of our teachers and their students in some cases, that we had so many students who actually were absent a significant amount and still passed their classes with C's or better. Next slide, please. This summary of the data sort of reiterates these key findings that you see in the data. What I'll focus on is the numerous strategies our sites have and continue to implement to redress these absenteeism issues, because I'm sure that's probably the hottest thing on your mind. So first, I'll say our ongoing anti-racism initiative to create culturally responsive classrooms in schools and classrooms. Our schools are working to be places that practice the concept made popular by the educator Zaretta Hammond called warm demanding, which means that we are warm in how we support and reach out to our students, and at the same time have high expectations of attendance and achievement. Secondly, we continue to target outreach to families of chronically absent students. Our staff have and continue to make phone calls, do home visits, and engage in lots of outreach activities to get our students reconnected and recommitted to school. We've also hired a new district English learner social worker, and at Peninsula are in the process of hiring a school-based social worker. In addition, we have implemented college counseling classes at the 10th grade level and similar course offerings intended to support student college and career planning, which is intended to help students find purpose and value in school. And lastly, we continue to invest in Tier 2. That was back to that chart that I was talking about earlier, this concept of MTSS, a series of Tier 2 supports, small groups and individual short-term therapy and support for students to get them back on track. Next slide, please. This next set of data is one that we've been tracking for a number of years, as you'll recall. It's our 10th graders on track measure, which is a leading indicator of student graduation in college and career readiness. Please remember, this is basically the percentage of current 11th grade students who had at least 110 credits by the end of their sophomore year. Oh, well, actually at the end of summer school last summer. Next slide, please. As you can see, we were at nearly 90% of all students meeting that benchmark. Next slide, please. This slide and the next one show the trends for the last 3 years, and we see a sort of relatively flat line. I'm going to jump us now to slide 25. If you could skip the next slide, please. This is our special population slide. And it basically, what I want to, there you go, next slide, thanks. What we see is that in the summary here is that we continue to have high levels of 10th graders on track for graduation across the board. Despite this group spending a significant amount of, just to remind us all, this group of current 11th graders have spent a significant amount of their high school careers in distance learning. There was some improvement, as you can see, for our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And we will continue to work with these students to get those who are not on track by providing them with a robust summer school program, as well as continued counseling, interventions, and on-site credit recovery during the school year. Next slide, please. This next piece of data is about another one of the metrics we are tracking this year in our district goals, and that is ongoing improvement of our students' access to and enrollment in college-level coursework, either advanced placement, international baccalaureate, or dual enrollment with the San Mateo Community College District. These slides summarize that enrollment. Next slide, please. This first slide shows that among our 11th and 12th grade students during this academic year, 66% of them are enrolled in one or more AP or IB classes. This is a slight improvement over last year's enrollment of 64% among 11th and 12th graders. Next slide. As you can see in this slide, it's a little hard because there's a lot of information there, but half of all upperclassmen gain access to 2 or more AP IB courses, while an average of 62 take 1 or more. Last year's students who took 2 or more courses of any group successfully passed their classes, with success rates exceeding 90%, with the exception of English learners at 82%. Next slide, please. And this slide is just a continuation of that same information, but sort of by school level. And by school site, you can see sort of the distribution. Next slide, please. And this is the one in some ways we're the most proud of and excited about. Whoop. Sorry. In addition to our AP and IB enrollment, we have continued to build out what we call dual enrollment with the San Mateo Community College District. This is offering community college coursework to students either on our campuses or on the community college campuses while they're in high school. So students get credit for us and credit from the colleges. Sometimes these courses are actually even taught by our instructors and sometimes by the community college faculty. We see significant growth in enrollment in these offerings, and we look forward to continuing this partnership. In particular, I would call out the growth in Latino student. You can't quite see it here, but we're seeing significant increases in Latino student participation in dual enrollment, and we're super excited about that opportunity that's been afforded to students. That in some ways, maybe those students haven't been taking advantage of our AP and IB program, and this is giving them a new venue for rigorous coursework. Next slide, please. So as you can see in this slide, this is just a quick summary of, I think, everything I've said, so we can jump to the next slide, please. This next set of data, I'm almost finished. I apologize. We have a lot to cover, and some of it we're required to cover because the state wants us to make sure we report this information to the public. This next set of data is required by the state, and this is the SAT that we administered in the spring of 2021. So back in April of 2021, we had just started back in school, if you can remember, with about a third of our students on campus, and the other 2/3 staying home. Next slide, please. And so as it says here, we opted to administer this to interested students. It was not compulsory for students given the situation of the time. And there was a lot of interest on the part of our current seniors, who were then juniors, to get the SAT taken, because there was a lot of pressure on the system of the College Board, such that there were not very many venues where students could take the SAT test during the school year last year because of the pandemic. And so we had a lot of students who couldn't sign up for the Saturday test, which is normally when students take it. So this was a voluntary administration, so you should take this data with that grain of salt, given that it really wasn't representative of the student population of the district. Next slide, please. And so you can see here by sort of district-wide, and I should have mentioned in the previous slide, the passing score, the sort of on track for college and career readiness score, is a 460 in reading and writing, and a 510 in mathematics. And so you'll see here that students in our district who took this test last year did quite well. But again, it is a select sample of students who took the exam. Next slide, please. And this slide again sort of gives you the breakdown by racial and racial subgroup. Again, not a representative sample of district students, so I think we shouldn't read too much into this data, but I do think for the 900 students or so who took the exam, they did quite well. Or sorry, the 759 students who took the exam. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I just said all that. So next slide, please. The final set of data is related to our graduation rate for the class of 2021. This is the only piece of 2021 data, class of 2021 data we're going to share. There's other data in the appendix about the class of 2021. We haven't had a chance to really kind of dig into that yet this year, and we're not going to do it tonight, but we did want to talk a little bit about graduation rate, given what's been going on with regard to the pandemic. Next slide, please. So as you can see, this class, we have a slightly higher grad rate than last year with our respective subgroups. Next slide, please. There's a summary there. We're seeing that the graduation rate was consistent with past outcomes, which I think is really great news. Some of that had to do with some of the legislation that was passed, but some of it had to, a lot of it had to do with the incredible work that people did that's been referenced throughout this meeting to get students over the line during what has been obviously an unprecedented time. We continue to see gaps in performance, I want to point out, among our Latino and Pacific Islander students, although they did see improvement as, relative to their own group. We saw improvement, and we did see a dip in African-American students' graduation rate. That one is always going to be, is going to have some fluctuation, given that the cohort size is usually somewhere between 15 and 20 students in the graduating, in any one class of African-American students in the district. So strategies that we're implementing to address the graduation rate issues are sort of very much in line with the chronic absenteeism ones that are further upstream. And that is continued support for our school counseling teams, social worker investments, and continuing to invest in the credit recovery options that we have as a district. I want to pause there and ask if there are any questions about the data. There's a brief piece here about the budget that we are compelled to do by the state as well. And I'll do that very quickly after you ask your questions and comments about the student achievement outcomes.
So I see Mr. Griffin has the hand up.
You know, there was a slide about 50 slides ago. I'm sorry that it was a good presentation. If that was your dog, I've been there, done that with animals. Remember the night of the bulldog that woke up to let everybody hear. There was a slide. It actually had to do with the relevancy outside of school for the day, you know, what they were learning. And I think that's, you know, and I can't recall the slide, and I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but I think that's really critical to, you know, like if they don't think it's going to do them any good, they're not going to pay attention. And I don't know how we can work on that. Are you familiar with that? Slide? It was in the very front of the presentation.
It's slide 12. It's slide
Okay.
12. And it's from our panorama survey. And we intentionally asked that question so that we could start to work on it, right? We kind of thought it might be around that number. We've never asked that question before. We will continue to ask that question and get that feedback from students, because that's one of the measures we want to really be tracking, is both how are students doing in terms of outcomes, but also how are they feeling about their learning? Because if this goal is absolutely about rigorous and relevant learning for students.
I hope, yeah, we can work on that one. And I think that starts the process right there. And then maybe you need MTSS and maybe you need other things, but you got to get them engaged because they think, really, you know, I'm going to need this someday. So anyway, good presentation.
So Trustee Land.
It's very interesting because, again, 50 slides ago, mine was very similar with the chronically absent students, and you're looking at pass and fail rates. It was very interesting to see that with career technical education, the percentage of pass and fail rate was much better than in mathematics. And one of the biggest issues is that relevancy of what is that? Why is it relevant to me? Well, career technology, then there's an investment there of chronically absent versus mathematics, which is, I don't understand why I need to do this. I'm not going to need this. And I think, so just highlighting that and kind of tying into what Bob was talking about, I think the information and how you've outlined this was a great presentation, long though it is, but required, of course. But I think in this sense, there is some analyzation of this data where we can draw some conclusions or at least ideas of how could we, as educators, figure out how to work with and improve the chronically absent students and what can we do for them. And that was just one example that I was thinking about that I just saw in the analyzing of the numbers. So again, it's very comprehensive. It's just, and very complicated, but what can we draw from these conclusions to help our chronically absent students? And I did notice your MTSS program and how we're doing and coming along, and with the training, I think that's excellent. I think that needs to continue, obviously. And then going back to the equity work, I think that is part of the relevance that needs to happen as well. And I think you're touching on that. And I think that will make some changes in approaches, especially in mathematics. So because again, the chronically absent, pass rate is 35% fail rate. And so, I think there's some real takeaways, nuggets that we can really work with on this in this analysis. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done on this. Everyone in the department. Thank you. And Brian, nice job.
So Trustee Dwyer.
Yeah, Brian, I think it was excellent. And I think you go so fast, you could do those disclaimers on the radio that they have to read, but all of that time without being fast forwarded in order to get that done. And it's tough because so much of it is important and so much of it is very interesting. And so it's nice to kind of take time and hear it from you, because you are the person, and, you know, sift through it. But I totally understand. I think we're really in a blip, the pandemic blip. And so it'll be interesting, you know, 5 years from now, how things look compared to this data that you have now, because I am hoping that we're never where we are again, which should help you have more real numbers, and, you know, make things more real. The relevancy thing I think is pretty funny, because geometry has turned out to be one of the most relevant things to me in my ordinary daily life. And when I was taking geometry as a student, it never dawned on me, and this is in high school, right? It never dawned on me that geometry would be something that I would pay so much attention, would be so relevant to me. So I think relevance is difficult to measure, but I think it's good that we want to tell kids why things are relevant, or why they're going to be relevant, and hope that they appreciate that just because it isn't super relevant right now, it could become more valuable as their life goes on. So thank you.
Trustee Zuniga.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say, first, thank you for the presentation. I always love how thorough you are, and yeah, it was a little fast in some places, but yeah, I'll ask other things later. But I wanted to know about kind of what Greg was alluding to with the absenteeism, and also Linda with the relevance and stuff like that. Have you kept kept track of why the students are absent? Like, what were the ways? And I know with the equity work, that's important because people will understand the communities a little bit better. I mean, not all of our communities, like the whole community isn't the same, right? But it's just, it's important to recognize that a lot of students, you know, live in environments that need them to, you know, help out in certain ways. And so they, you know, maybe can participate, or maybe they were graded on keeping their screens on and things like that. So has there been a way of keeping that information?
So I think we're digging into the reasons were sort of in a variety of categories, I would say. I mean, I think there certainly were students who were sick or had the virus. In some ways, that's like one category of students, right? Then there's students who, because of their home situations, because of their circumstances, they couldn't come to school as often. We've definitely had a lot of mental health challenges, right, with students and getting kids to come back to school. So there are multiple categories, and we're digging in kind of with staff is listening a lot, as you know, as part of our empathy work, as part of our anti-racist initiative. There's a lot of listening going on to kids about what their experiences are and how we can build scaffolds and supports to them. And that's everything from, you know, independent study to other forms of you know, education. I would say this first 6 weeks of this semester has really pressed on the system again, anew, if you will, because there was so many students who were out for significant chunks and kind of in and out. And I think, you know, we've given teachers some guidance, some grading guidance as they came up at the end of tomorrow is the last day of this first 6 weeks. Report cards will be coming out. We've really encouraged a lot of tolerance and accepting of late work and all of that stuff. And I think teachers are going to be really conscious of that and give kids no marks in some cases when students are not, when it just isn't, we're not quite sure where they are yet. So anyway, there's a lot of things going on, and we continue to listen. So absolutely, we are listening to try to find out how we can be more supportive of students and their families.
Thank you.
Okay. I had a couple of comments. And it is hard to make judgments on this because we've been in such an unusual situation for 2 years. But you know, I still, you know, as you mentioned, you know, some of the highest absentee rates are among the IEPs and the 504s and the ELs and the socioeconomic disadvantaged. So you know, it's kind of the classic areas where we're still struggling, and that's, you know, those aren't new areas. We were struggling in those areas before. So, it just emphasizes that, it's just hard to say whether we kind of treaded water for 2 years and that was a good thing because we could have been worse, or but obviously we still got a lot of work to do. The other observation that strikes me when I'm looking at this data, and particularly looking at grades and so forth, is, I really want us to get common assessments back in this district. We just need some kind of basic assessment tool that cuts across the district, that is a common value system. And the state is not providing that, certainly not providing it for high schools. And I just feel like we need that. And grades do not give that to me. They might be some indicator, but I'm not satisfied that grades give me that indicator. I really want to push for common assessments being reestablished in this district. The other areas that I think we need to really work on is when you look at AP enrollment, almost at whichever demographic group that you look at, it's kind of flat. I mean, it's, and that includes the white demographic group and any other demographic group. We're not increasing the percentage of students in almost any demographic group that are entering AP classes. And I just think we really need to work on getting, more students into AP classes. I am impressed that we're making progress in dual enrollment, and I would take I take that as real progress, and I would say focusing on also getting more students involved in the dual enrollment program is a good thing. I'm concerned that the Latino graduation rate was around 84.6. That's a real concern. That's not an acceptable graduation rate for me. We've got to really do better with that. And I think, you look at some of the other ones in around that area, the socioeconomic graduation rate at 85, the EL graduation rate at 70. Those are real concerns for me. And building off of that, the AG completion rate, we're doing pretty well as a district at 74%, but then you look at the demographics, and it's 50% for Latinos, and 56% African American, and about 56% for Pacific Islanders. So there's real groups in there where we're not doing so well, and particularly Latinos, which is such a large percentage of our student body. I just it's been hard to stay even the past 2 years, but I think as we're looking forward, we've got to continue to focus on those areas and really make progress, because those students are so much of our future in this area, in California generally, and we need them to do better, and we need to do better by them. So that's my takeaway. But it was a very good presentation, very thorough and very comprehensive. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate more data is better for me. Trustee Land.
Sorry, I forgot a couple things that tie into what you were talking about. So I totally understand where you're coming from with common assessments. But the one thing that my caveat is our work with equity makes sure that they are culturally responsive common assessments, because again, assessments can be judgmental and biased in some ways. And I think that's something that we have to take into account. The one thing I was going to mention before Peter talked was that I forgot was the warm demander component. I think that is an element that we've learned as a result of the pandemic is a complete, and again, with these subgroups is totally important that you have this kind of idea of warm demander. I mean, Linda Darling-Hammond has been tweeting out lately about exactly this. And we've known this research for a while that students who are like the socioeconomic or English learners, it is all about connection and it's all about that warm demanding. And it's not just about demanding, but that warm demanding. And the warm component is that connection, that engagement, that is, and that relevance. And so it's everything that you've kind of embodied in your presentation. So I definitely wanted to mention that as an educator, that's critical. So thank you for putting that in. All right, I'm done.
Okay.
So
let me check if there's any public comment. I don't see any.
I was just do one last little bit here that I have to do. Sorry. If you could put the presentation back up. Sorry, unless there are any other comments. Sorry, I didn't.
Oh,
interesting.
Dude, this better go fast, man.
So you all saw this previously. I guess we maybe have known because you all asked us back in October, well, back in the summer, to give you an update on how we were doing with regard to the COVID-related expenditures. So I'm not going to really go into any detail here. What you basically get here is a little bit of an update on where we are currently with the $18-ish million that we've received. We've spent about half of it up until first interim. And so I'm not going to present anything on it here. Just know that the slides have within them the content of sort of where we are. We will certainly give you, as we are required, and certainly even at the end of the year, a sort of summary as part of the budget work, kind of a summary of how we've done. But this was just a little bit, another little dipstick, which we were required to do in this LCAP supplement to the annual update. So, and I'll be sure for Mr. Hanley next time to have, 85 or 90 slides. So thank you.
Okay. Are you going to go through any of them, or you okay?
Just any questions if you had anything in there you wanted to pull out.
Okay. Okay. I don't see any public comment. So going once, twice.
There are none.
So there's no vote. There's no vote required on this.
No.
So let's vote. Let's move to L3, a presentation on the process to create trustee areas and public hearing regarding the content of trustee area maps. So let me set a goal for us, if I can. What I would like to do is have our consultants and experts make their presentation on this, and have the public hearing so we can gather any public comments, input from the public, and then have a discussion, an open discussion for whatever time we need to have a discussion about the maps. But with the idea that at the end, perhaps each trustee will give their top 3 maps, and we can see where we are. If we all agree on the top 2 maps or 3 maps, then maybe we've made enough progress that we can move to the 24th in voting on a map. If we need more time, we can come back on the 17th next week after we've selected a search firm and have another discussion but let's try to have each trustee give a top 3 at the end of this and see where we are. Is that good?
Really good. Excellent job, President Hanley.
Okay. Okay. Let's proceed with, I don't know who's here. Who's here?
Oh, okay. So Mr. Hanley, thank you. I think it's my turn. Thank you to you, President Hanley, and members of the board. So we do have with us tonight Jonathan Barry Smith from Lozano Smith, and then we have Douglas Johnson, our demographer, with us tonight. So I'm going to kick it off very briefly to just thank you for the opportunity to again talk about the California Voting Rights Act. And I'm going to share just a few points on why it's important and what our outreach efforts have been to date. So next slide, please. So why should the California Voting Rights Act matter to our voters and the folks who live within our district? Simply put, the California Voting Rights Act will prevent an at-large election system from diluting minority voting power and protect the ability for minorities to influence the outcome of an election. It will create maps to balance the population of the district into 5 voting areas while enhancing minority voting rights. And perhaps the biggest change that voters will see at the polls will allow them to elect a single board member from their trustee area where they live. And this potentially can lower the cost of candidates running for school board. Next slide, please. So I want to take just a minute to talk about some of the outreach efforts we've made to publicize our work around the California Voting Rights Act. We have, tonight we're in map hearing review 2. This is our 4th public hearing. And Dr. Doug Johnson is going to present to you on the maps that we have to date. I want to point out that most of our outreach efforts have been in English, Spanish, and Chinese, which are the predominant languages spoken in our district. So we have promoted the California Voting Rights Act and our transition to by trustee area election on our website and on the school websites. We started an email campaign over the summer. And so we started to email students, parents, staff, and stakeholders starting back in July. If you've been reading the Daily Journal this week, you've probably seen our daily ad. And we've shared information about the California Voting Rights Act through word of mouth. We pitched a story to Sing Tao, which is perhaps the most widely read Chinese language newspaper in the Bay Area. Mr. Griffin spoke to the Black Parents Association at their recent Unity in the Community convening about the CVRA, and I spoke to DLAC, the Equity Advisory Committee, and I've spoken at length with the PTO Council. I've also worked with partner districts and municipalities to promote this in their e-newsletters, and I did see today, one of our board members shared with me the Burlingame e-news, and so they did push that out. I believe it was today, so that's great news. We've pushed this out on our social media platforms and in our e-newsletters, both our e-news roundup that goes out the week of the board meeting and in the superintendent's e-news. Next slide, please. So we want your input tonight. So if you're out there watching the meeting and you want to comment, what you need to do to comment tonight during the public hearing is use the raise hand feature. So if you've never done this, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon with the raised hand. You click on that and the board president will call on you when it's time to have public comment. If you would rather send your comments in writing, you can send them to comments@smush.org, and we'll share them with the board after tonight's meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Doug Johnson, and we'll keep it moving on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll jump into the presentation here now. Get that to the screen. Okay, there we go. So we are getting close to the end of this road. The schedule did start with initial 2 hearings and the beginning of the outreach effort that you just heard about. Then we did come back in January with the first discussion of draft maps And tonight, statutory is the first opportunity the board has to adopt a map, as was just mentioned by the board president. If you're not ready to adopt a map tonight, it's not required. You still have additional time to get through this process. And just to highlight for those that haven't seen the presentation before, this is an unusual issue where the board action is not the final action. It will then, once the board selects a map, that then goes to the County Committee on School District Organization for a final review. Just to quickly go through, because we like to remind everyone is each time we show the maps of what the rules governing how the maps are drawn are. First of all, we have our federal requirements. On the left, you can see each district has to, or each trustee area in this case, has to have an equal population. And there's a very small margin on that where we can be plus or minus a little bit from the ideal, but it really is a strict limit. We have to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act, of course. And another part of federal law is no racial gerrymandering. So race can be one consideration when you're choosing a map, but it cannot be what the courts call the predominant consideration in that process. When it becomes a predominant consideration, you're dividing neighborhoods because of race, that also violates federal law. And all the maps we're presenting today comply with those requirements. Where the decisions really come down is in balancing the goals, or what are called traditional redistricting principles. So again, these are goals, they're not requirements, but we want to choose a map that keeps together communities of interest, that has relatively compact and contiguous and trustee areas that follow easily visible and understood boundaries. You can, the courts have said, consider, again, this isn't a requirement, it's just one potential consideration, trying to avoid head-to-head contests so that we're respecting the voters' choices and the voters get to make re-election decisions rather than the lines dictating it. You can also, to a very limited degree within that equal population range, underpopulate by just a couple percent a trustee area that you know is going to grow faster than the others. And then when it comes to redistricting down the line, later on, you can also consider trying to minimize how many people are shifting election years. People don't like to move from, say, a 2022 seat to a 2024 seat because that delays their vote. And you can also try to keep together the core of the existing election areas, which is why this first time through the process is especially important, because these are going to set up those trustee areas for the future. Did want to put these in. You've seen this before, and most people are probably familiar with them, but these have been referenced a lot when we're talking about the different maps. So I do want to show them. On the left is the attendance zones for the different high schools. Each color indicates the area where the students attend that high school. And on the right are the cities. And also there's some census places in there that aren't incorporated cities, but are treated very similar in redistricting. So these are maps we can come back to and refer to if you have questions through this process. Getting into the draft maps, I'll highlight the one that's new, but most of these you saw at the last hearing as well. Draft 101 is focused on attendance areas, so it tries to align the trustee election areas with the attendance areas as much as possible. You can see, for example, the pink area 1 has all of Cappuccino High, but that's not enough population for the equal population requirement. So then that pink area 1 extends south into Mills High School as well. Area 2 again gets part of Mills, and then almost all of Burlingame High, and so on. 3 is the northern part of San Mateo High, and then 4 and 5 are down in the south. 4 gets Hillside High, but Aragon is too large and gets divided as Mills did. So this is one where you're trying to keep attendance zones focused within a given trustee area. That is one approach to it. The other approach that many jurisdictions take, actually probably more jurisdictions take, is to intentionally not align the trustee areas with the attendance zones. The fear being that while aligning them gives a strong voice to that attendance zone in that election, it can also lead to balkanizing, where board members start to feel like this is my high school, I have to fight for it against the other high schools. So different, oops, and I skipped a map, but I will, let me, as long as I'm talking about 103, I'll talk about that. So this is the other approach where you intentionally try to say there are multiple trustee areas covering each attendance zone, so that each high school has multiple board members who represent it. and board members are representing multiple high schools, it reduces that balkanized feeling of, I have to fight for my high school feeling. Either one of those approaches is valid. They both have their pluses and minuses, of course. Let me go back to the one I clicked over too fast there. 102 is similarly geographically focused, but in this case on the feeder school districts. So in this case, I'm trying to align the trustee areas with the elementary school districts that feed into the high school district. And so you can see the green lines indicating the different feeder districts. And again, it's far from a perfect alignment because the population requirements of the trustee areas obviously aren't rules for how the feeder districts would go on. Then the new map, 103B is the new map that wasn't presented before. So this was taking into account board feedback and the discussion at the last hearing. This similarly is blending the attendance zones. And so you can see we've got the coastal trustee area 2 and then more inland area 1, each of them taking some of Cappuccino, some of Mills, and so on. The big thing that came out of the discussion was a feeling that there's too much, or a sense in the community of El Camino Real being, you're either inland from El Camino Real or you're Bayside, and a real division. And the desire that was expressed was, let's not contribute to that. Let's not try to use El Camino Real as a border. So in this case, very carefully took that El Camino Real corridor, both sides of El Camino Real, and kept it together rather than using it as a divider. So up north, area 2 comes across El Camino Real. It actually gets Cappuccino High School, the school site, and then keeps at both sides of the El Camino corridor are in area 2 as it moves south. And area 1 is more inland. You can see this also leads area 1 to come down and get some of Burlingame High School's attendance area. Again, the goal is to blend attendance areas. Then when we get down to area 3, there's a shift. You can see how it's marked as Highway 82, that's El Camino Real. It then moves inland so that at the south end, area 1 includes the El Camino Real corridor, and then it's solidly in 3, and we move over area 3's eastern border is really the railroad tracks as it comes down until it gets to area 4. So this is a similar idea to 103, but again, per the discussion last year, not using El Camino Real as a community dividing line. And then the last map is kind of a blending, kind of a smorgasbord of lots of different considerations. Again, we're blending attendance zones. We're also intentionally trying to make sure that each feeder district has multiple trustee areas representing it. And then trying to take a step to kind of the opposite of what we just talked about with 103B. We're trying to use major roads wherever possible. So you can see El Camino Real up in the north and the city border of Millbrae. And then we try to follow major roads and get a little bit straighter lines, especially down in the south, drawing these lines. So now we have 5 options. I didn't add 103B to this slide, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of them. There are demographics for each map provided on the district website and in your packets. And also there's available, I was showing you these stock images. I do want to highlight that there is, as you can see on the screen, the interactive review map that lets people pick whichever map they want to look at and zoom in. And you can even enter an address to type in your address and find out if a resident wants to find out exactly which trustee area they'd be in. And you can compare, you can overlay maps. So if you look at 103 and 103B, the darker areas are in the same trustee area in both maps, and the lighter areas are where there's a difference between the 2 maps. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I should note as well, Jonathan Berry-Smith is with us from Lozano Smith. So if you have legal questions about this as well, you can answer that. I don't know, Mr. Berry-Smith, did you want to add anything at this point?
Oh, yeah, thank you, Doug. That was a great presentation. The one thing that I would briefly add is when discussing these maps I would recommend discussing which map the board and the community prefers, but also in the back of your mind, thinking about the election sequencing. That would be a second decision that would need to be made at the final map adoption hearing. It's both picking a map and then afterward picking the election sequencing to go along with it. I could definitely discuss if there's any particular questions about how the election sequencing works, but I think logically it makes most sense to start with maps and then deal with election sequencing. Although if you wanted to have any questions about that answered before selecting a map, like I said, I'm happy to help out there.
So Trustee Dwyer, you have like a clarifying question?
I have a couple questions. I guess they're clarifying. Does each map equally meet our goals, the goals we are to have?
Sorry, I was muted. I would say yes. I think they meet them in different ways, but I think no one way is better or worse than any of the ways the others do.
So can you expound on that a little bit? Okay, 101, how does that meet our, what about 101 makes it a good choice?
So the key initial requirements that we look at for every map is a population balance. And so yes, the difference between the smallest and largest trustee areas in that map are 5.09%. So we're allowed a range of at the very most 10%. So it's well within that allowable range. And then in terms of the Voting Rights Act, we don't have any majority, there aren't Latinos or any other protected class or Asian Americans concentrated enough to be a majority of a trustee area, but it does avoid dividing any of the pockets, essentially the neighborhoods that are heavily in any of those classes. So it does fully comply with the requirements of the Federal Voting Rights Act. Then when we get into the communities of interest, and major and following visible, easily understood boundaries, that's where we get into a little bit of conflict and really board decisions about which approach you prefer. 101, to as much as possible, is treating the high school attendance areas as the focused community of interest and trying to keep each trustee area aligned with a high school attendance area as much as possible. So in that way, it's complying with the community of interest requirement. But as I was saying, there are different ways to do it. So 103 and 103B are respecting communities of interest by ensuring they have multiple representatives. So it's also fulfilling the requirement, but just in a different way.
If I could just briefly add to that, I'm wondering if it would also be helpful for Trustee Dwyer if we noted the population deviations of each map, because maybe, a board member might have a preference for a deviation that's only 1% as opposed to one that's 8%, something like that. Is that something maybe we could add to a chat or anything like that?
Yeah, I can. There's only 5 maps, so I can run through them real quick. And these are in your packets in the demographic sheets at the top. Actually, probably easiest if I show what I'm looking at so you know where to find them. Let me share this again. So, as I mentioned, where you look on the statistical sheet is the percent deviation, and you get the deviation of each trustee area as we go from across that third line. And then the key number is the difference between the smallest, which in this case is area 3 at -3.02, and the largest, in this case area 5 at 2.07 over. The difference between those two is 5.09%, which is called your planned deviation. And that's, it has to be below 10%. So at 5.09, you're half of the allowed deviation, which is great. 102, you see, is very similar at 5.41%. 103 is even smaller deviation, only 1.74%. The new 103B is at 2.56, and 104 is in the middle of the range at 4.19. So all these plans are well within the 10% range.
But 103 is 1.74.
Correct. So if you were down to a coin toss decision, if you felt all the maps were identical, or two maps were identical, that's a fine consideration to use to resolve that coin toss. But I don't think I would rule out a map because one's at 1.74 and one's at 5 and change.
Okay. I'm trying to determine which one, maybe one or two, are absolutely in the best interest of our constituents. That's what I'm looking for. And it's hard because there's so many similarities when you look at the data. The differences are so slight, but you do this for a living. So can you just tell me what are the top two that really would be the most constituent focused?
Well, I think they're all very constituent focused. I think what it really boils down to is what makes the most sense for the residents and neighborhoods of your community and how you as a board interact with your jurisdiction. So rather than me giving my opinion as a Southern Californian, although my dad taught in the area, I didn't go to school in the area. I think if you're up in the air and don't have strong feelings, your fellow board members may very well be better at giving useful insights on which ones work best for your neighborhoods than I am. In terms of the perspective of what am I here to deliver is in terms of compliant, accurate maps that reflect the criteria, I think they're all excellent.
I'm glad you like your work and you like your job. It's very important. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying because we've never had this before. We've represented everyone. And so I see everyone as the same. So now I have to see neighborhoods and I have to see things differently. So I want to make sure that I'm actually seeing that and not just anecdotally that, there's data that shows that how these groups should be served. And I guess that's my difficulty with all of this, actually. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think Trustee Zuniga is next.
Yes, thank you. One of my concerns is getting representation from the actual community, like we're doing with of course, the trustee elections will do that. Like the north part of our district doesn't have a lot of, doesn't have any representation from that area, like actual people that are candidates from that area. What concerns me though are the election years and how soon, like what does that mean in getting a candidate to run? And what type of, I guess, how difficult would that be to find people, like say we do pick one of the maps and we pick a scenario that, needs them to run this year, like things like that. I guess if you could tell me like in relation, the maps with the elections, I guess what would be the most not easy to deal with, but I think you know what I mean. In order, like, I'm trying to really understand, like, all of these maps look so similar and they all meet the same type of goals, but I'm trying to find, how it's going to be different for me, and so in terms of like how this affects our community, the students, the families, just all of it.
Sure. You raise a concern that comes up a lot, which is, the goal is to make sure that all parts of the district have representation when you're electing by area. And that does raise a question of, are people ready to run? So is it better to have a vacant seat in those areas now? As you say, we're only, the clock is ticking towards the 2022 election already. Or is it better to wait and have those vacant seats come up in 2024? So there's more time for people to learn about the opening, to learn about what the job entails, and to start organizing. The other factor, and I'll run through that in just a moment for the different maps. The other factor that's related to this is that if you have an area that's relatively low turnout, those areas tend to do better being on presidential election cycles, so that the relatively low turnout folks have higher turn because they see a larger jump in turnout in the presidential years than they do in the off-year elections. Sometimes it's better for areas that are relatively low turnout to have them up in a presidential year. The flip side to that, just to make sure I'm giving you all the arguments to consider, is that some advocates do say, we've had trouble electing, let's get someone on the board from our area right away. And so we're in that odd part of the cycle where the next election is an off-year election. So our historically unrepresented, less represented area is better off holding an election right away to get someone on the board now, which makes them on the gubernatorial year permanently, because this is a permanent decision. Or are they better off kind of holding off having that seat up for 2 more years? Again, it's like the attendance zone question. There's no right or wrong answer to that question. But let me walk through the slides just to give you a sense of what happens in each map. So on each of these slides and on the PDF maps that are on the website, there is the proposed election sequence. And there are, for most of these maps, there are alternatives that the board can choose from. So for draft 101, you could either have area 1 in the north does not have a current trustee in it. And so one election sequence would have that seat up in 2024. So I put in the presidential year and a little more time for people to learn about the job and get interested and organized. The other option, the other election sequence option, would put that seat up in 2022. So it would have it come up for election this year. Draft 102 has 2 vacant seats, areas 1 in the north and area 3 down the Hillsborough Woodside area are both vacant. And so in one election scenario, those are the 2 seats that are both up in 2024. In the other scenario, they both come up in 2022. And then 103 actually is the same. 1 and 3 are both vacant, and they could either both be in 2024 or they could both be in 2022. And that holds true. There aren't huge differences in 103B, so it follows the same pattern. 104 is the only map that has all these election years are dictated by where the current board members are by statute. And so 104 is the only map that has a current board member in each trustee area. And so there would be no vacant seat in this map. And by statute, areas 1, 3, and 4, because that's where the 2022 trustees are, would be up in 2022. And areas 2 and 5 would be up in 2024. So that's the only one where you don't face a choice in what election sequence you want after you choose, if you were to choose that map. All the other maps, you would choose the map and then decide what election sequence you wanted for that. So I don't know that helps you narrow the choices down, but hopefully it does provide the information you're looking for.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna hold the public hearing.
No, Mr. Land.
Greg, you have another question?
Actually, no, I'll hold off. If there's a public comment, I'd rather hear that first, and then I'll make my comments later.
Okay. Let me open the public hearing so we can gather any public comments that anyone has on the maps or the process. Let me first say that Ms. Shockley has done enormous outreach over the last several months to as many people and as many groups as we could possibly find about this process and the maps and the transition away from at-large to district elections. So we have made a concentrated, focused, and widespread effort to get the word out about this. But let me open the public hearing Is there anyone who wishes to speak? I see one Jennifer Way.
I'm sorry, President Hanley, Amy Johnstone is promoted. She had her hand up. She's waiting, and then I will bring in Ms. Way.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Johnstone, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, President Hanley. First, I just wanted to acknowledge sort of my gratitude. I think this is a really powerful change that we're all undertaking, but I also recognize it's really tricky as it has a direct influence on all of your seats and your future elections. And I'm just grateful that you as a board have always had a student-centered approach. So while I welcome this new process, I just want to name that you all did such a beautiful job, as Ms. Lees Dwyer said earlier, of thinking on behalf of all of our students. So I think the big change for us is just direct representation. So thinking back to some of the pandemic, how it sort of shined a light on some of the inequities in our district, and looking at the data, the two big criteria in my mind that really stood out as being able to increase representation were education and household income. So when I dug into those numbers, and perhaps Mr. Johnson could explain whether this is a wrong or a right way to look at it, but what I tried to do is to look at different zones that were creating as much difference from the average, because as if each of the maps and each of the zones within the maps were too close to the average, then it felt to me like it was recreating what we already have. It's not actually creating that minority representation. So with that in mind, I just want to say that my personal recommendation, just a voice of one, would be map 102. And in particular, because it creates in zones 1 and 4, really unique areas where there's significant deviation when you look at the level of high school graduation, the graduate degrees, and the income in the 200K plus. That's very different from the average. And so that's on one end of the spectrum, working at the average. And then it also creates just a single zone in zone 3 that's on the other end when you look at those 3 metrics as well. I saw as you dug into some of the other maps that I felt like there were multiple zones that were actually showing more areas with high level of income. And I do have concerns about that in our district. And I would prefer a map that created 2 zones that was really looking at some of these other areas. So that's why I like the zones 1 and 4 in draft 102. So in closing, just I want to thank you for giving us so much input and really posting all of this data online in advance, because it's a lot of numbers to work through, and it gave us all time and space to do our best to become informed. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We have another speaker.
Yes, President Hanley, Ms. Way is now joining us.
Yes, Ms. Way, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Great. I will be way under that for once. Thanks so much for having this discussion. I wanted to raise the idea that I think I was at a couple of the events where, trustees and Laura Chalkley were presenting the information, and I got the sense that our community is still sort of overwhelmed. I mean, Amy Johnson is amazing and she's very convincing, and I actually personally agree with a lot of what she's saying. So we're really stoked that she got to speak and give her opinion. I do wonder if, I don't know if you're planning to make the decision tonight, but I do wonder if there can be more targeted community outreach, if we can hear more or just be soliciting more. I'm not sure how to run focus groups, but I do have, it's a lot to work through. And I don't know that our community is completely able and like not really, I don't feel like we've been given a lot of time and space to work through, although the outreach has been amazing. I think that maybe some more follow-up would be great, so that maybe board members or district, district administrators or people from the district are kind of with groups to help them sort through that data. So that would be my only requests. Thanks so much.
Thank you. there any other speakers?
No, President Hanley, that's everyone.
Okay, let me close the public hearing. Okay, Trustee Lee's Dwyer looks like is the first one.
I'm actually the second one. Greg is first.
Well, that's not what Zoom says.
Oh,
but
I'm flexible. Go, Linda.
Okay, I guess I just want to. I understand Ms. Wade's concern, and I mean, I guess that's a concern we should think about just slightly, a little bit at least, because I think the Omicron surge really slowed down. You know, it seems like Ms. Chalkley has done an incredible amount of outreach, but the response has been really little. And that makes me concerned that because of Omicron, people have not come out or responded, because they're all, you know, people are focused a lot on the pandemic still. And that concerns me, because I really don't want to do something that without as much public input as we can have. So I know it is a concern. I think her concerns, what she said, is very legitimate.
Yeah, we're on a bit of a schedule. I mean, we can look at it, but you know, we've got to get this finished so that it goes to the county, and then the county needs to get it to the election office, and that has to happen by the first part of April. So we're on a bit of a timetable. But anyway, Mr. Land.
Thanks. Just in, you know, I understand what Jennifer's talking about, but you outlined it pretty well. It's like we're under a time constraint, and how do we do both? My concern just echoes what Jennifer said, because we have this very important discussion and we have about 9 attendees at this point. And, you know, it's a shame because we want to have more input than this. So I am concerned, and I think however we can get our next couple of meetings to have more people. I mean, again, Linda, I hear what Linda's saying, but I also know that even with Omicron, we can get online, and that's why we have the meetings this way. So I think there's a lack of concern, which in my mind means we're doing something right, but you know, but it also means we're not getting input from people who maybe we really want input from. And I know that the outreach has been great, and I think it's just a shame we just don't have it at this board level, meet at this level. And I think that's the thing that I'm concerned about. Getting to one of the questions, one of my questions comes from looking at the election sequence. For example, if we have draft 101 and we put an area that's vacant in the 2024, like area 1 2024 vacant in that time, what happens when we do the elections in 2022 and those 3 get elected, but there's a vacancy? What happens for 2023 and 2024 before the election?
I think I could jump in. Trustee Land, you mentioned draft 101. So that's one. Let's just start with the proposed election sequence.
Right.
The question here is what happens in trustee area 5, because you have both trustees Hanley and Zuniga in that area. Currently, correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Hanley is up for election in 2022.
That's correct.
So,
yeah.
So what happens here, and there's multiple legal interpretations. One is, since Trustee Zuniga is up for election in 2024, she was already voted by the people to be in her seat until 2024. One interpretation is she automatically gets, quote unquote, grandfathered in there, because you can't take her out through like a stroke of a pen, just saying, oh, we're using this election sequence. Sorry, you're out of there. And that would mean that that seat's taken, and thus Trustee Hanley would automatically be off, or let's just say cannot run in trustee area 5. If trustee Hanley moved somewhere else, maybe to the vacant trustee area 1, that would change things, but that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that we would not, well, the other interpretation is trustee Hanley could still run in this trustee area, and that trustee Zuniga would still be an at-large trustee. So the 3 trustees in trustee area in 2022 would be elected by trustee area, but you would still have an at-large member still around, and thus that leaves a vacancy in trustee area 1 for a while. And so it can be, the election sequencing can get a little complicated there. I'm curious if Doug, do you want to add anything or?
Yeah, I think just to reinforce what you're saying, none of this, what I'm about to say won't be a surprise to any of these board members or the superintendent, but the education code's a mess. So for cities, it's pretty clear that you represent whoever elected you. So if you're not up until 2024, you'd stay at large, as Mr. Barry Smith was just mentioning, is one interpretation. Unfortunately, the Ed Code had some provisions in it that raise questions about whether that approach applies to schools or not. Mr. Barry Smith's firm has run into this a number of times, and they're kind of the experts on what a mess it is. But the idea, what we found in practice is that, all of you were elected at large, you're still going to take those phone calls, from the people in the other areas, other than the one you're going to run in. It's one of the nice things we've seen is there was a fear that immediately people would focus on their trustee area, and it just almost never happens, thankfully. So that kind of cushions the confusion in, who is accountable to who for that 2 years of transition. It would be, the idea is that the folks who aren't up until 2024 would stay on the board, would be stay essentially acting as representatives of the entire school district. And obviously the hope is that everyone will continue throughout years to be responsive to everyone in the whole school district. But you do hit on a definite gray area in the law about technically, for example, if someone wanted to recall or if there was a vacancy and you had to do an appointment, it is a very gray area about what happens with those vacancies.
Thank you.
I would add too on the question you raised and that Ms. Dwyer raised about getting the word out. One thing that I think would definitely help is what Chair Hanley was talking about doing is if you can get it down to really 2 maps tonight, that will make Ms. Chalky's life much, much easier. Because right now she's got to sell this kind of vague idea of the transition, and there's 5 maps, and as some of you expressed, it's hard to differentiate between them. If she can transition that messaging to, we're making the transition, do you prefer map A or map B? That's a much easier message for people to grasp and to bite into, and that might help you get more substantive comment on those 2 maps for next time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just gonna, I'm getting tired, as I always do at this time. What I really propose from my, so going with what President Hanley wanted was, we wanted to get down to what we can get comfortable with and what we need to talk about and what we approve of and go with it. So I'm going to do that. So in my mind, looking at all the maps, my 2 proposals are draft 102, and because it has to do with more feeder districts than it actually does with the high schools. And I think that's important. I also do the alternative because, again, my philosophy would be you'd want to have new people in area 1 and area 3 right away. So you have a new diverse board according to what is being asked of us right now. So I would do alternative election sequence 102, draft 102. And then my second choice is I do appreciate how draft 103 does not balkanize at all and is really breaking up and having a lot of diversity in these areas. So, and I think it's a good alternative. So it's really coming up with 2 very different maps that might be useful. And again, I would go with the alternative election sequence and draft 103B, because again, it does do a lot more in diversity and really opens up some spots 2 spots, 1 and 3 specifically, for election. So I think those are the 2 that I would like to see, but I'm always willing to listen. Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
102, 103.
I would just say that those are exactly my choices too. 102 is my first choice. 103 is my second choice.
It was 103B for me.
Oh, 103B? Okay. My choice is 102 first, 103 second.
Mr. Hanley, did you say 103B or 103?
No, 103.
Okay, and Mr. Land, you said 103B. Okay.
Correct.
I'm ready, Peter.
Yes, Linda, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't like the choppiness of 103B. I don't, it chops up, I think it chops up neighborhoods more than 102. I like 102 as my first choice. And I think I like 101 as my second choice. I'm going to look at 103B again, but I would go with 102 because I think it keeps neighborhoods together. And I think that's important for people to be voting within their neighborhood. So I think that would be, 102 would be my first choice. And 102 and then 101. I think the 103s are too choppy. And I think 104, let me open it real quick. I keep opening these. 104 is not bad. No, 102 and 101 keeps neighborhoods together. And I like that. So, and the voting thing, the sequencing, I'm not certain on that at all yet.
Mr. Griffin.
Look at 102. I got to go back on, I probably am somewhere in the 103 and maybe 102. 103B did kind of create a lot of, what I'm trying to avoid is maybe a little curly cues and little odd pieces stuck in so that you sort of have blocks, because I think when I see those little curly cues, it reminds me of sort of gerrymandering. But 102 seems to be a pretty good map, and 103 I think is a pretty good alternative. So that would be my choices. Now I can't get to sequencing because I can barely get to the maps because they all look the same at this point.
So your 102 is your first choice and 103 is your second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it 103 or 103B, Bob?
No, 103, because I thought 103B had peculiar sort of little pieces, but I'll...
So Trustee Zuniga, where are you?
I was in the same camp. I think it was the 102 definitely, and then the 103B was something that I was looking at as well. But I was concerned about the elections and how, how soon people could get someone in those seats, Yeah, but those were my concerns.
So I'm sorry, you partially cut out, at least on my computer. 102 was your first choice and 103?
Yes. 103B.
103B was your second choice.
Yeah, sorry, my internet is so bad tonight.
Okay. So we're basically unanimous on 102 as the first choice. So
don't jump to conclusions too quickly, my friend. I think we still need to have input from people.
If I might offer a suggestion, and Mr. Barry Smith, please weigh in if I'm getting a little ahead of things, but I mean, you might select 102 as your tentative choice, which could then put the word out, and that could then let people, we could really focus the discussion and the request for public input on number one, you know, it's a tentative choice, it's not final, but more number two, what election sequence makes more sense? And you could really focus your next hearing on that election sequencing question if you're ready to make that step at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I want to wind this down. I mean, we need to wind this down and come to a conclusion. The question is, you know, can we do that? Can we do that on the 24th? I mean, do you want to schedule another public hearing for the 17th and see if somebody shows up? I mean, we can do that. And give people, say that map 102 is our tentative first choice, and that that 103 and 103B are I don't know, what do you call them, Doctor? Do you have Dr. Johnson? Do you have like tentative runner-ups, or would you even put them out there as at this point?
I mean, they're out there, and certainly, you know, all five maps are out there, and the line I always use is nothing's final until it's all final. I mean, you have all five maps out there. People who have some concern about 102 could certainly look at the others as what they like better. But I think if you put 102 out there as your tentative choice, and you're looking for public feedback on whether that is the right choice, that will get the messaging out. I mean, Ms. Chalky may have comments too on, she certainly knows more about how to communicate this effectively than I do, but I'd be comfortable with that. And then we would, of course, leave all the maps up on the website. Everything stays completely accessible to the public so that they can still look at the other maps.
Why don't we put out that 102 is our tentative first choice, and that we will hold a public hearing to gather any comments on the 17th, with notice that we will make a final selection on the 24th.
I think that's a good idea, Peter.
Okay.
Lihia, I think Trustee Zuniga has her hand up.
Yeah, I just have a question. So
yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. How can we get more people to understand this a little bit better? Sometimes it's just like the language of it. I mean, not everybody knows what this is and what it means and why it's important to them. Even if it's just like a message, I don't know why it's important in different languages sent out to the rest of the families, or maybe they can, you know, talk to someone specifically that can help them if they have questions. And just, you know, referring back to what Ms. Way was saying, she's right. And if we are going to allow more people, or if we want more people to give input, again, you know, like the relevance conversation we had earlier, why is it important to you, you know?
Well, I think we've done an enormous amount of that. I mean, we've done it with DLAC, you know, we've done it with the Chinese community. I think we've done an enormous amount of that. And in the next week, we can do some more of that to try to invite people to come in on the 17th and give us some final feedback on it. And you know, at the end of the day, they do or they don't. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got a timeline, and we've got to make a decision. But we've held public hearings for months now, and we've done an enormous amount of outreach on this, and we need to move forward on it.
Yeah, no, I totally recognize there has been a lot done. I've seen it, I've heard it, you know, and it's just like, is there somewhere we didn't, you know, we didn't know? I don't know. It's just like, I wish there were more people that would get involved in this.
I would add on that point, just clarification that there were a lot of people on the peninsula who were very involved in redistricting issues. You know, the county had a lot of people involved. There was a lot of weighing in on the state effort. You have, you know, Burlingame and San Mateo are both going through this right now. A lot of your feeder districts going through it right now. And where there's controversy, we are seeing Peninsula folks turn out. So I do think, as was mentioned earlier, I think the lack of turnout for these meetings is, number one, the satisfaction. You know, that people are not, you know, the board isn't fighting this transition. So those people that want you to make the transition, you're not fighting it. And I think there's a lack of controversy, which is a good sign. And then there is an element of people are just trying to burn out on redistricting, I fear. So kudos to Ms. Johnson for doing that detailed analysis even at this point in the process.
So Mr. Land, I think you had your hand up.
Actually, I think it was Linda.
Oh, was it Linda? Okay.
Yeah, I keep, the Zoom thing is the key.
Okay. Linda, go ahead.
You can't trust the Zoom. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Peter. I think we should publicize that our next meeting is the 17th. And if you don't like 102, you need to come and tell us why, because we have a consensus, and that's amazing. First discussion like this. So I think that I think we should do exactly as you suggested. I'm absolutely in favor of that.
Okay. Mr. Land.
I absolutely do not agree with you both. I get it. I think 102 is a very practical map, I think, for a lot of reasons, and I'm really willing to go with that. But I also liked 102, 103 and 103B. I don't care either one as an alternative. I think it's important to mention it because I want to express my willingness to listen to the public in some way. And I don't want to define it like, hey, this is what we want, let's just go with it. I hear what you're all saying, and I totally get what you're saying. It's like, hey, this is what we're leading with, and let's go with it. But I want to offer an alternative at some point to say, well, here's the choices. What do you think? And maybe that'll draw in, because it kind of goes to what Dr. Johnson was talking about. It's like, define it by 2. We've narrowed it down. Now you got a choice to make. Which side are you on? Are you on 102 or 103? And I think that might gather some folks to come in and talk with us about this. That is the only concern that I have. That's the only reason why I would want to do 2 maps, or at least suggest number 102 is where everybody agrees, and 103 is a potential possibility as an alternative. You really need to make a choice. We're deciding on X date.
Well, it's 103B and 103. So, I mean, there's 2 of
them. Hey,
I'll
narrow it down to 2. I don't care.
That's not a bad idea.
I think it needs to be 2 choices because they're very different choices. The reason why 102 works is it has natural boundaries, like people are saying. It's the feeder districts, and everybody really associates with those feeder districts. So if you're in San Bruno Park, then you're thinking San Bruno Park. If you're thinking Millbrae, you're thinking Millbrae. So I think that is why it is a good choice, and why I think we all agree on it. But I really feel like 103 and 103B really have that idea that multiple schools are being represented by one candidate in each area. And I think there is, and I'm looking down the road where not just now, but in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, Cappuccino, they're all fighting for one thing for Cappuccino, like the bond money is going to only be for Cappuccino and not for this. And so I have some concerns about that. I don't know to what degree, but hey, I'm thinking of it. So.
Yeah, Linda.
Okay. I'm not on mute. Okay. I hear what Greg says, and I really do. I think that telling people that this isn't the only choice, that we're only limiting it to 1 is probably a good idea. On the other side of your 103, though, the 102 families connect at the elementary level. They're neighborhoods, they're neighborhood based. They become so connected. And when they go to high school and they get all split up, it's hard on families. Families lose that connection. So that's one of the main reasons I like 102 is it keeps families together, neighborhoods together. So, but I think that that it shouldn't be just that people should be able to see that there's other ways to slice it and dice it. Yeah, and I think that's probably a good thing. It might engender more interest, and that we need interest.
Well, we could say that the other maps are still viable choices.
We could say that there has been significant interest in 103 and 103B, even though that 102 is the first choice.
Could I just jump in? This might help. Noticing the preference for 10 or potential preference for having 102 as well as the 103s, it appears that all three of those maps have the exact same proposed election sequencing and alternative election sequencing, which is helpful to know that regardless of those three maps, it's not like you also have to determine which election sequence, you could go with the strategy of, here are three maps, they're identical in election sequencing and the alternative there. So it's less to determine later on. It's like one decision, which of these three maps? And then once we pick that map, since they all have the same election sequencing, we just have to pick one of those. So just wanted to throw that out.
That's good. That's good to know. Well, Laura can frame it.
Okay. So, okay, I want to wrap this up. We're gonna all go crazy here shortly. So the public hearing will be poised as 102 is the board's first choice. How do we phrase it with the 102, 103, and 103B as maps that have been also considered?
There you go.
That's good.
Yeah, and the board at this point has eliminated maps 101 and 104 from consideration.
Yes.
I'm good with that. Even though I liked 101, I'm good with that.
Too. I still don't understand 104, but that's another thing.
You don't have to.
Well, it's gone.
Okay.
I want to make sure, Ms. Chalkley, I want to just say that once again, she's just done, she comes in my office all the time. This has been a big part of her work, and she's just done a tremendous job here. I do think that there are, to Mr. Johnson's point, the district is, I think, running well. There's not a lot of controversies. There's not a sort of throw the bums out kind of thing. It's just not going to be something that every day people wake up thinking about. So don't be surprised if you don't have a lot of folks, because it's certainly not because Ms. Chalkley hasn't been thinking about ways to get more people involved in this. So I think we've got a message now. And to your point, Mr. Johnson, this may help us focus people's attention a little bit. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did
I think Mr. Land, you sent me a text that you'd like to be excused now to get some rest.
Yeah, I've got a funeral tomorrow, and I've got to prepare because I'm talking. So I got to go. So I'm sorry, everybody.
Godspeed.
No, we wish you the best.
Bye. Okay. Let's move to, we have nothing in construction tonight. Let's move to section N1, approval of personnel actions.
Yes, and addendum, we have 7 longevity recognitions tonight. Patricia Jackson, art teacher at Mills High School, has submitted her retirement effective May 27th after 24 years in the district. Margot Myman, math teacher at Hillsdale, submitted her retirement effective May 27th after 20.5 years in the district. Steve Allicott, counselor at Aragon High School, submitted his retirement effective June 6th after 29 years. Lillian Laszlo, Spanish teacher at San Mateo, submitted her retirement effective May 27th after 10 years. Susan Shapiro, Spanish teacher at San Mateo High School, submitted her retirement effective May 27th after 10 years. Layla DeCastro, paraeducator at Burlingame High School, submitted her retirement effective February 28th after 17 years and 5 months. And Joyce Lynn, college career and financial aid advisor at Cappuccino, submitted her retirement effective June 30th after 25 years.
One other guy submitted his retirement too.
Dr. Skelly, we mentioned that last week after 7 years in the district, effective June 30th.
We can just have him do his every meeting, so no one.
Okay.
He doesn't forget. No, I'm just kidding. He can rescind it at the next one if he wants to.
Oh, we can do that easy.
He can rescind it before we have to pay money for the selection people.
Okay.
Think of what you'll save us, Kevin. I move approval of the personnel actions. I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Trustee Dwyer, a second by Trustee Griffin. How do you vote, Trustee Griffin?
Aye.
Trustee Zuniga?
Your mic's off.
You're muted.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Trustee Dwyer?
Yes.
And I vote yes. It passes 4-0 with Trustee Land absent. N2, public hearing for the 21-22 salary schedule for the American Federation of Teachers, AFT local, I can't read it, 4681 or, yeah, 4681. I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this particular issue?
No.
Okay, I will close the public hearing. N3, approve the American Federation of Teachers AFT Local 4681 2122 tentative agreement.
The district recommends approval of the tentative agreement with the AFT adult school teachers. It provides 1 week of preparation before each semester. This has been, this solidifies what has been done the last couple of years. It does include a new provision for prep time each week for teachers. The district agreed to increase the health benefits and provide a compensation system for teachers to attend professional development. And it includes a 3% salary enhancement and a $2,000 one-time prorated payment.
Okay, is there a motion to approve this? Or is there
a comment? I want to make a comment. I'll make a motion and comment. The adult school is so important to our communities, and the work they do is so important to so many people, particularly the immigrants who come here at older than age 18. And so I am 100% in favor of this new agreement, and I move to approve it.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Trustee Dwyer, a second from Trustee Griffin. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Zuniga?
Yes.
Trustee Dwyer?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So 4-0, Trustee Land absent. N4, review, discuss, and approve the job description for the new stipend position of district standardized testing coordinator.
Yes, this is a new job description that formalizes the testing coordinator duties. We've had individuals perform these duties in the past, and this job description provides an official role for these specified duties and tasks to organize and administer the standardized testing.
Any discussion? Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Trustee Griffin, second by Trustee Dwyer. Trustee Griffin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Zuniga?
Yes.
Trustee Dwyer?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And so it's 4-0. Again, Trustee Land is absent.
Can I just ask a quick question, Peter? Were
sure.
we supposed to vote on the salary schedule, or was we voted on the contract? but we didn't vote on the salary schedule. Were we supposed to vote on the salary schedule too?
That's part of the TA agreement.
Okay, but they're separated on this agenda. So by approving the contract, we approve the salary schedule?
That the raise is on the salary schedule. We can put the formalized salary schedule at the next board meeting.
Okay, I just want to make sure
with the incorporated raise or
okay.
enhancement.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
The public hearing was on the agenda, but it wasn't. The salary schedule wasn't specifically on the agenda.
Yeah, it's right there. It's under the abstract on the, it says salary schedule. It's under, right below personnel addendum.
Information only.
That's public hearing. It says public hearing.
Okay, so that wasn't, okay, underneath the public hearing is the salary schedule.
It's the AB 1200 for the salary schedule that the county approves, yes.
Okay.
But we can bring the formal salary schedule to the next meeting.
Okay. I just want to make sure we get it approved if we need to approve it.
The approving the TA includes the salary enhancement of $2,000 one-time payment. That's in the TA. It is attached.
It incorporates the salary schedule.
It incorporates the raise to the salary schedule and the one-time payment, and the salary schedule is in the CBA.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay, so we have nothing in instructional services or student services or business services, board operations, review and discuss the calendar for board meetings for 22-23. The superintendent and I went over some changes.
Yeah, so Mr. Hanley, what we've done here is looked at some comments here, and we've put them so folks can see them. One of the pieces that we did is we moved the first board meeting to August 11th. That will be more staff friendly because generally speaking, August 1st is when folks come back, and that allows at least for a bit to prepare for the board meeting. That also will allow the board to hear from principals after the first day of school. So 2 meetings in September, 2 meetings in August, 2 meetings in September. We looked at this and there's only a need for 1 meeting in October. Then in November, if we follow the typical sequence, there'd be 1 meeting in November. In December, that December 15th meeting stays the same. That meets the legal requirements. If you remember, we had to have a special 10-minute meeting to reorganize the board. And this will be more important in the next year because you will have an election as opposed to this year when you didn't. January, like this year, we would have 1 meeting on the 19th. And then the February meetings follow along. We eliminated an April meeting because that follows what we did this year. And then in May, you'd have the meeting on the 14th. So you'd have 2 weeks from the April meeting to the May meeting, and then 2 meetings in June to review, to have a first reading and then an approval of your budget and your LCAP.
I guess, can I make a comment, Peter?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I just feel like, it's 10:20 and we're still meeting. And we used to have 2 meetings in December. We used to have 2 meetings in October. And I am concerned that we've eliminated a number of meetings from this calendar. And I mean, I could look at the other months historically, but I'd rather have a couple meetings as placeholders if we need them and take them off than not have them and then have to specially set them and try to make the meetings so we have more time to discuss things and we don't get this, we just sometimes we just have too much on them. And I feel like that because we've cut back on meetings, that's the result. And again, it's 10:21, we're still meeting. So I think we should add at least maybe 2 more meetings to this calendar, because otherwise, you know, in April, well, maybe is that spring break? I don't know, but 2 in October, 2 in December. You know,
we never had 2 meetings in December.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did, because we met the first Friday of the month is we had a meeting, and then we
no, that was always CSBA. We were always at CSBA in the first week in December.
Well, okay. Not always, but anyway, I just feel like it's not. We're going very late on these meetings because we've cut meetings.
I'm not convinced adding a meeting is gonna cut down how late we go.
This is for discussion.
Okay.
Tonight is you don't.
I'm
have
not
to
against
vote.
any of the changes. I'm fine with the calendar changes. I just feel like we're kind of short. Like what? Why did you take? Oh, I see the 19th touched on the 26th.
So maybe folks, why don't we use this as a starting point, Ms. Leeswire, and then if you've got input, we can talk about it during agenda setting, or you can give me a call.
Okay, and other trustees may have input too. I'm not the only one.
Yeah, and we don't have
I'm
Mr.
just awake
Langer.
enough to, I'm here talking. Okay.
Okay. Did anyone have on R2? Did anyone have some comments on those policies? Did everyone get a chance to review them?
They were all CSBA.
They were all basically statutory, as nearly as I could see.
Yeah, there was nothing in there that.
I was fine with the least based on the recaps.
So they can go on consent next meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any requested board items that need to be beaten around the, around the head? Are we done?
6 more minutes, it'll be 10:30, Peter.
I think we're done.
I think we're done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
I declare this meeting adjourned.